Mega Knight is ruining the game. Mega Knight is no skill. You're adopted. You've heard the complaints 1,000 times, but no card in Clash Royale history has ever generated this level of pure, unfiltered outrage. A 7 elixir titan with more health than a lava hound, and a crushing spawn impact. Yet beneath the rage lies an incredible story. Settle in for a calm, comprehensive deep dive into his secret history, night school trauma, and arena evolution. Designed to help you unwind and drift into a peaceful sleep. To understand the origins of the Mega Knight, one must look far beyond the clashing steel, thunderous arena deployments, and massive splash damage leaps that define his presence on the modern battlefield. The true history of this legendary splash tank begins in a place of deep vulnerability, far removed from the glory of royal victory, the roar of the arena crowds, or the high-stakes strategy of top-ladder play. Long before he ever donned dark steel, strapped massive iron spheres to his wrists, or slammed down from the sky to obliterate incoming pushes, the man inside the suit was simply a young warrior, trying to find his place within the strict, unforgiving hierarchy of the realm's military academies. Despite his imposing physical stature, broad frame, and natural structural mass, the man inside the armor was born with a very specific, surprising trait. Exceptionally small, delicate, and pristine hands. Long before he ever touched dark iron or forged weapons of war, his natural hands were described as remarkably smooth and refined, completely lacking the rough calluses, scarred knuckles, or broad, thick structure, typical of a frontline warrior destined for heavy combat. In a world that valued physical toughness, rugged strength, and the raw, unrefined power of heavy brawlers, his hands stood out as an awkward anomaly, a delicate feature attached to a person who otherwise possessed the frame of a titan. This unique physical trait became the source of profound personal struggle during his early formative years at night school. Night school was not merely an educational institution, it was a grueling testing ground where squires, young knights, and aspiring warriors were conditioned to endure extreme hardship, master heavy weaponry, and display absolute physical intimidation. Surrounded by peers who boasted thick, battle-worn hands, capable of gripping massive broadswords and heavy wooden shields with raw ease, the future Mega Knight found himself isolated and relentlessly mocked. Trainees, squires, and even rival fighters turned his natural physical feature into a persistent point of ridicule, constant taunts, and cruel jokes that echoed through the stone corridors and training grounds. For a young man seeking honor and respect, the constant psychological toll was overwhelming. Every weapon drill served as a painful reminder of his insecurity. While other squires swung heavy practice maces with thick, calloused palms, his small hands required custom grips just to hold standard military equipment. The teasing was not contained merely to daily practice sessions. It permeated every aspect of social life within the academy walls. The subtle giggles during armor inspections, the whispered comments in the mess hall, and the lingering stares whenever he removed his gauntlets steadily chipped away at his self-esteem, instilling a deep sense of shame regarding the very body he was trying to condition for battle. The absolute peak of this relentless torment occurred during a moment that was meant to celebrate academic unity and martial progress. The publication of the annual Night School Yearbook, printed on thick parchment and distributed to every student, faculty member, and visiting military official, the yearbook contained formal portraits of each class. Due to an unfortunate framing choice by the Academy's official painter, his portrait prominently featured his hands resting awkwardly on a pedestal. The illustration captured every tiny detail with painful clarity, displaying his pristine, unblemished fingers in stark contrast to the battle-hardened appearance expected of a royal knight. When the yearbook was released, the resulting reaction across the Academy grounds was immediate and merciless. Copies of the page were passed around, pointed at, and openly laughed over in the courtyard. What was intended to be an official historical record of his training class had transformed into a permanent catalog of his deepest insecurity. The realization that his small hands were now preserved in ink forever, available for every future generation of squires to see, became the final catalyst for a total physical and psychological transformation. Overwhelmed by intense shame and driven by a desperate desire to erase the source of his embarrassment, he made a radical, life-altering decision. He concluded that, if his hands and face were the cause of his torment, they would simply never be seen again. Retreating into the dark forge rooms of the Academy after midnight, working by the glow of molten coals and iron furnaces, he began constructing a disguise so complete, so massive, and so heavy, that it would swallow his original identity entirely. His first goal was absolute anonymity. He fashioned a heavy, enclosed iron helmet, featuring a narrow, horizontal visor, completely obscuring his facial features, eyes, and expressions. But concealment alone was not enough. He needed a radical solution to physically hide his hands forever. Rather than forging standard iron gauntlets or chainmail gloves, which would still reveal the relatively delicate proportions of his hands, he conceived a far more extreme design. He cast two enormous, solid iron wrecking balls, complete with heavy spiked protrusions and reinforced steel cuffs. These massive iron spheres were designed to be mounted directly over his forearms and wrists, permanently encapsulating his pristine hands within hundreds of pounds of solid, destructive metal. With his hands completely sealed away beneath iron walls and spikes, no one could ever comment on their size again. To balance the incredible weight attached to his arms, he constructed massive dark steel shoulder plates, a reinforced chest piece, and heavily padded leg guards, turning himself into a literal walking fortress of iron. When he stepped out onto the night school training grounds the following morning, clad in this total suit of dark iron, the transformation was so complete that no one recognized him. The delicate, quiet squire, who had been the subject of relentless torment, had vanished entirely, replaced by an imposing, anonymous titan of steel, whose very presence commanded immediate silence. His former bullies looked upon this new figure with confusion and caution, completely unaware that the giant before them was the very same person they had spent months ridiculing. The secret was safe behind solid iron walls. However, hiding his identity beneath hundreds of pounds of metal introduced a completely new set of operational challenges. While the wrecking ball hands successfully hid his pristine fingers, they drastically altered his physical mechanics and spatial awareness. Having solid iron spheres instead of articulate hands meant that basic human interactions were instantly rendered impossible or unbelievably dangerous. Simple daily actions required immense concentration, but because he was still adjusting to the sheer momentum and weight of the iron spheres, disastrous accidents occurred constantly across the academy. For instance, in moments of forgotten excitement or casual greeting, he would instinctively offer a friendly gesture to a fellow squire, entirely forgetting that his hands were now solid wrecking balls. A simple, light-hearted high five delivered with an iron sphere carrying 50 pounds of force would send fully armored instructors flying across the room, breaking shields, shattering wooden target dummies, and leaving massive structural dents in stone walls. Everyday tasks within the academy barracks became hazardous zones. Attempting to open a wooden bathroom door or push open a heavy oak gate frequently resulted in him accidentally ripping the entire door off its metal hinges or completely shattering the doorframe due to his sheer, unchecked kinetic force. The physical hazards posed by his presence quickly escalated beyond what the academy could handle. Training sessions were repeatedly halted because his accidental swings would obliterate weapon racks, crush stone benches, and destabilize structural pillars. The faculty faced an unprecedented dilemma. They could not discipline him for lack of strength or poor discipline, as he was clearly dedicated, but keeping him within the general student body posed a clear and present danger to the physical safety of every student, instructor, and piece of academy property. Faced with mounting repair costs and endless structural damage, the administrators of night school made a hasty administrative decision. After a single week of him wearing the armor, the faculty officially granted him a full graduation diploma. This was not a traditional graduation earned through years of tactical study and sword mastery. Rather, it was an emergency administrative measure implemented simply because it was far too dangerous for the teachers and students to keep him on campus. With his official diploma in hand, and his true identity still completely hidden beneath his iron visor, the newly christened Mega Knight walked away from night school, leaving behind a legacy of shattered doors, structural wreckage, and bewildered instructors. Stepping out into the broader world as a free-roaming juggernaut, he eventually discovered the royal arenas of Clash Royale. Within the arena, the very traits that made him a hazard at night school, his massive physical presence, his crushing iron wrecking balls, and his ability to cause mass destruction with minimal effort, turned him into an immediate sensation. Crown towers cheered as he landed on enemy pushes, crushing supporting troops and controlling entire lanes with his terrifying splash damage. He had finally found an environment where his extreme physical modifications were not only accepted, but celebrated as the pinnacle of defensive power. Yet, despite reaching the absolute peak of arena fame and becoming one of the most recognized legendary units in the realm, his deep-seated psychological trauma never truly dissolved. The inner wound inflicted by those early years of ridicule remained tender beneath his heavy steel plating. He lived in constant anxiety that his identity would be discovered, and that the world would learn the feared arena juggernaut was once the small-handed squire from the yearbook. This hidden insecurity reached a breaking point when rumors began circulating through the arena taverns that a single surviving copy of his old night school yearbook painting still existed somewhere in circulation. The thought of that picture, displaying his small, pristine fingers for the world to see, being held by an arena spectator, a rival king, or an enemy unit, ignited an unquenchable wave of raw fury inside him. This furious realization fundamentally altered his behavior on the battlefield. It gave birth to his signature, iconic combat mechanic, the wild, enraged arena leap. Whenever he is deployed onto the sand, he is not merely defending a crown tower or executing a tactical order. He is driven by a desperate, frantic rage. He hurls his massive weight through the air, leaping wildly across the arena turf and smashing into groups of enemy troops with blinding velocity, constantly searching the ranks, searching the faces, and smashing through defenses in an endless, relentless quest to track down the owner of that embarrassing yearbook picture and destroy the final evidence of his past forever. Thus, the secret of his pristine hands, the trauma of night school, and the forging of his heavy armor form the undeniable emotional core of the Mega Knight. What appears on the surface to be a simple display of raw power and heavy iron is actually the outward manifestation of an ongoing personal struggle, a journey from an insecure squire mocked for his delicate fingers to an unstoppable titan whose overwhelming force reshaped the history of the arena forever. Chapter 2. While the genesis of the Mega Knight's physical armor was rooted in his desire to conceal his delicate hands, the immediate aftermath of his transformation created a psychological and operational rift that defined his entire military adolescence. Night School was an institution built upon rigid discipline, precise swordplay, and traditional martial etiquette. The arrival of a student clad in hundreds of pounds of solid dark iron, wielding two unyielding iron spheres instead of standard steel, fundamentally disrupted the structural integrity of the Academy's daily operations. The psychological toll of his new lifestyle was immediate. Though he had successfully erased the visible source of his ridicule, he had inadvertently isolated himself even further from his peers. Unable to grasp everyday objects, perform basic maintenance on his living quarters, or eat meals without assistance, he existed as a phantom within the stone walls of the barracks. His every movement was accompanied by the heavy, echoing clank of iron against stone, serving as a constant auditory reminder of his self-imposed exile from normal human interaction. The fear of exposing his true identity kept him silent, giving rise to an imposing, stoic persona that masked a deeply chaotic inner struggle. In the training yards, the physical consequences of his iron wrecking balls manifested in catastrophic ways. Traditional nightly sparring relied on controlled strikes, parries, and measured footwork. However, the sheer kinetic mass attached to his forearms rendered subtle movement completely impossible. When instructed to practice basic defensive parries against wood and leather training dummies, the momentum of his swings would carry the heavy spheres completely through the targets, shattering the reinforced oak posts and sending heavy splinters flying into the spectator stands. The Academy's faculty attempted to adapt his curriculum to account for his unprecedented mass, but the danger to surrounding students grew exponentially with each passing day. Simple conditioning drills turned into hazardous events. During routine formation marches, a sudden stop or minor trip would result in him tumbling forward like an avalanche of iron, crushing armor racks, leveling stone perimeter walls, and leaving massive craters in the dirt yards. The instructors quickly realized that his body was no longer that of a squire. He had transformed himself into a siege engine with human instincts. The breaking point for the Academy's administration occurred during what was meant to be a standardized martial evaluation. Instructed to demonstrate his proficiency in single-target defensive engagements, he swung his right wrecking ball with slightly too much enthusiasm. The resulting force not only obliterated the iron-reinforced target block, but the follow-through momentum carried his fist directly into the primary load-bearing pillar of the Academy's eastern wing. A deafening crack echoed through the stone complex as structural fractures spidered up to the ceiling, forcing an immediate evacuation of the entire facility. Confronted with astronomical repair bills, structural instability, and a student body that was terrified to enter the training grounds alongside him, the leadership of night school recognized that standard educational protocols could no longer apply. They could not formally fail him, as his raw power and defensive capability far exceeded any warrior in the academy's history. Yet, retaining him as a student posed a severe operational liability to the survival of the institution itself. Thus, after exactly 7 days in his heavy iron suit, the faculty convened an emergency administrative session. In an unprecedented move, they drafted a special decree granting him an expedited full graduation. The diploma was handed to him at a safe distance across a ruined courtyard, marking the shortest tenure of any student in the history of the realm's military academies. He was officially declared a knight, not because he had mastered the noble art of the sword, but because the academy simply could not survive another week of his presence. Stepping past the shattered gates of night school with his diploma sealed beneath his chestplate, he found himself entirely alone in the vast wilderness of the realm. He was a knight without an army, a warrior without a master, and a physical juggernaut whose every step left an indelible footprint in the earth. The trauma of his formative years, the mockery of his small hands, the shame of the yearbook photo, and his sudden expulsion from the only community he knew, condensed into a singular, driving motivation as he set his sights on the distant, booming horns of the royal arenas. The transition from the ruined courtyards of night school to the roaring sands of the royal arenas marked a fundamental shift in how the Mega Knight interacted with the world around him, yet it also amplified the deep-seated psychological fury that drove his every action. In the arenas, his unbelievable physical mass and destructive capacity were no longer treated as structural hazards or administrative nightmares. They were celebrated as the ultimate spectacle of defensive power. However, while the cheering crowds, glowing crown towers, and endless accolades satisfied his desire for purpose, they did nothing to quiet the burning obsession that raged beneath his dark iron visor. The true catalyst behind his iconic, terrifying combat mechanics lies entirely within his unyielding search for the lost night school yearbook. As rumors swept through the kingdom that a single intact copy of that agonizing publication had survived the demolition of the academy and was now being passed around by collectors, goblins, and rival royal factions, his mental stability shattered into pure, focused rage. The thought that somewhere in the arena stands, or within the ranks of an opposing push, someone held a clear, painted image of his delicate, pristine fingers was an indignity he simply could not tolerate. Every match was no longer just a battle for crown trophies or elixir efficiency. It was a desperate, high-stakes dragnet to track down the document and destroy it once and for all. This perpetual state of frantic infuriation directly birthed his defining tactical ability, the heavy, long-range arena jump. Unlike standard frontline units, who march forward with measured steps and disciplined formations, the Mega Knight operates on a violent kinetic frequency. When he identifies a cluster of enemy units, or senses an incoming push within his targeting radius, the overwhelming fury surges through his armor. He bends his heavily reinforced knees, loading hundreds of pounds of kinetic potential into his steel-clad joints, and launches his entire multi-ton frame high into the air. To the spectators sitting high in the stone bleachers, his airborne trajectory looks like an awe-inspiring, majestic display of superhuman strength, a giant iron meteor soaring across the battlefield, blotting out the sky before crashing down with the force of a localized earthquake. But to the Mega Knight himself, that moment of flight is a frantic, wide-eyed scan of the enemy line. As he hangs suspended in the air for that split second, his eyes scan frantically through his narrow visor, scrutinizing every single enemy troop, every goblin pocket, every archer, and every knight, desperately searching for any sign of parchment, ink, or a hidden book pouch. When he slams back down onto the arena floor, the impact is catastrophic. The sheer mass of his iron armor, combined with the gravitational momentum of his descent, creates a massive shockwave that reverberates through the dirt, stone, and tile of the arena floor. Supporting troops like archers, goblins, and musketeers are instantly flattened or sent flying backward by the sheer concussive blast of his landing. Ground units that survive the initial shockwave find themselves dazed, their formations shattered, and their momentum completely erased. Yet, as the dust settles around the crater created by his boots, the Mega Knight does not pause to celebrate or admire the carnage. He immediately scans the ground where the enemy units once stood. kicking through the debris and shattered armor to see if a yearbook had dropped from their belongings. Finding nothing but dust and fallen weaponry, the cycle instantly repeats. The moment another target enters his sightlines, the rage flashes again. His target acquisition logic is fundamentally driven by this relentless, obsessive pursuit. If a squad of barbarians emerges from the river, he does not merely see a threat to his king tower, he sees 5 potential suspects who might be hiding the evidence. He crouches, loads his leg hydraulics, and launches himself forward again, clearing river gaps, flying over minor obstacles, and crushing entire squads beneath his heavy wrecking balls, in an endless, leaping assault across the map. This unique combination of psychological trauma and extreme kinetic energy altered the entire strategic landscape of Clash Royale. Enemies quickly learned that deploying mid-cost ground pushes against a player holding a Mega Knight was a recipe for instant disaster. The moment a push crosses the bridge, the sky darkens, and the heavy Iron Titan comes crashing down directly on top of their win conditions. His initial spawn impact functions as a devastating localized fireball, neutralizing support troops before they can even register his presence, while his follow-up melee swipes sweep through remaining swarms with broad, punishing arcs of iron. Yet, despite his terrifying dominance on the arena turf, the mechanical reality of his jump ability requires precise spatial conditions. His internal targeting logic demands a minimum distance to initiate the leap. If an enemy troop is right up against his chest plate, he cannot generate the necessary upward clearance to launch his heavy body into the air. In those tight, point-blank engagements, he is forced to rely on his heavy, swinging wrecking ball fists, battering single targets with slow, methodical strikes. But the moment an enemy creates distance, or a fresh wave of troops spawns 3 to 4 tiles away, his internal rage triggers instantly. The minimum distance threshold is crossed, his knees buckle inward, and he takes to the sky once again, turning the battlefield into a continuous series of cratering impacts and flying dirt. Over the years, this constant leaping and crushing has left physical scars across every arena in the realm. From the pristine green grass of Goblin Stadium, to the frozen ice of Frozen Peak, and the scorched stone of Pekka's Playhouse, ground crews are constantly forced to repair the deep craters, cracked tiles, and shattered river bridges left in his wake. Arena superintendents have spent vast fortunes reinforcing the subterranean support beams beneath the battlefield floors, just to ensure the ground doesn't completely collapse under the repeated stress of his multi-ton landings. For the rival kings who command him on the battlefield, understanding the Mega Knight's internal motivation is the key to unlocking his maximum strategic value. He is not a mindless brute who simply wanders into danger, nor is he a disciplined soldier following rigid military doctrine. He is an unstoppable force of nature, fueled by a deeply personal vendetta. Every leap is driven by shame, every crater is forged by insecurity, and every crushed push is simply a byproduct of an eternal, desperate search for a single piece of paper that was printed years ago in the dark halls of night school. As long as that single copy of the yearbook remains unaccounted for, the Mega Knight will never rest. He will continue to launch his iron mass into the sky, soaring over the river, smashing into enemy lines, and leaving a trail of shattered defenses and cratered earth across every corner of the royal arena. The legend of his heavy leaps continues to grow with every match played, cementing his place as one of the most feared, controversial, and deeply complex figures in the entire history of the Clash realm. Chapter 4. Spawn Impact Physics. While the psychological fury of the Mega Knight drives his continuous leaping across the battlefield, his initial entry into the arena represents one of the most violent physical events in all of tactical warfare. Known formally as the 7 Elixir Spawn deployment, his arrival is not a simple walking entrance from the backlines like that of a Giant or a P.E.K.K.A. Instead, the Mega Knight is dropped directly from the royal transport blimps high above the arena, plunging through the atmosphere like a meteor of dark steel and solid iron. This deliberate entry method turns his very deployment into an immediate, devastating offensive spell that alters the trajectory of an entire match in a fraction of a second. To understand the sheer magnitude of the spawn impact, one must analyze the kinetic energy generated during his descent. Weighing several tons due to his thick plate armor, reinforced shoulder pauldrons, and massive solid iron wrecking ball gauntlets, his terminal velocity creates a massive downward vector. When this incredible mass collides with the stone tiles and dirt turf of the arena, the energy has to disperse instantly. It does not simply stop. It radiates outward, in a perfectly circular concussive shockwave spanning a 2.2 tile radius. This shockwave functions identically to a heavy, localized fireball spell cast precisely at ground level. The initial impact force deals tremendous instantaneous splash damage to every ground unit caught within the landing zone. Fragile support troops, such as archers, spear goblins, skeletons, and princesses, are erased instantly upon contact, their forms vaporized by the sheer pressure wave before the dust even clears. Medium health units like musketeers, wizards, electro-wizards, and zappies survive the initial blast but suffer severe health depletion, leaving them critically weakened and immediately exposed to his follow-up melee swings. Beyond raw damage, the physical mechanics of the spawn impact introduce a critical vector of crowd control, multi-target knockback, and momentum disruption. The concussive blast does not merely injure surrounding troops, it physically displaces them, pushing lighter and medium-sized units outward, toward the perimeter of his landing radius. This forced spatial displacement breaks tight offensive formations, separating frontline tanks from their backline support. A tightly packed push, consisting of a giant escorted by a witch and a musketeer, is instantly dismantled upon deployment. The support units are knocked backward and dazed, while the Mega Knight emerges at the center of the crater, positioned perfectly to absorb the tank's attention while crushing the weakened backline. Furthermore, the spawn impact possesses a reset mechanism that disrupts channeled attacks and movement animations. Sparky's lethal coil charge, Prince and Dark Prince momentum charges, and Battle Ram sprints are instantly cancelled upon taking the initial landing damage. The violent shudder of the ground forces these units to reevaluate their targeting parameters, resetting their attack timers, and stripping away their momentum bonuses. This renders the Mega Knight one of the most absolute defensive hardstops in the history of the arena, capable of turning a massive, game-ending offensive push into a complete wipeout with a single, perfectly timed deployment. However, mastering the deployment physics requires precise spatial timing and elixir management. Because his deployment costs 7 full units of elixir, a player must commit nearly their entire bank to drop him onto the board. A misplaced spawn impact that misses key support targets or lands on an empty tile represents a catastrophic waste of resources, leaving the player low on elixir while the Mega Knight slowly trudges forward without achieving maximum value. The optimal deployment window occurs precisely when the enemy push crosses the bridge and clusters near the arena center, maximizing the number of units caught within his 2.2 tile blast zone. The structural impact on the arena environment itself is equally profound. Repeated deployments over the course of a match leave permanent structural stress on the battlefield floor. Subterranean stone arches crack under the force. Turf is stripped away to reveal bare bedrock, and thick dust clouds rise several meters into the air upon every landing, momentarily obscuring sightlines for both players. The iconic thud of his deployment echoes across the entire stadium, serving as an unmistakable auditory cue to the opponent that their offensive investment has been completely neutralized. In the grand hierarchy of Clash Royale mechanics, the Mega Knight's spawn impact stands as a masterclass in hybrid unit design. He is not merely a tank, nor is he merely a spell. He is an immediate, reactive collision of kinetic physics and defensive utility. By combining the damage profile of a heavy spell with the lingering, high-health presence of an Iron Titan, his deployment forces every opponent to play with absolute caution, knowing that a single clustered push can be instantly flattened beneath the weight of 7 elixir crashing down from the sky. Chapter 5. To truly comprehend the strategic depth and overwhelming presence of the Mega Knight's jump mechanic, we must first slow down and visualize the fundamental architecture of the Clash Royale battlefield. The arena is not simply a patch of grass or a stretch of stone. It is a rigid, mathematical, two-dimensional coordinate system, a meticulous spatial grid composed of exactly 18 tiles in width and 32 tiles in length. Every interaction, every movement, and every line of sight in the game is governed by this invisible, underlying geometry. When the heavy Iron Titan steps onto this grid, his entire existence is dictated by a constant, rhythmic calculation of distances, vectors, and proximity thresholds. He is not merely walking forward. He is constantly scanning, evaluating the precise tile distance between his heavy iron boots and the nearest enemy unit. This constant state of spatial awareness forms the bedrock of his most terrifying and defining ability, the jump vector pathing. Understanding this pathing is essential for anyone seeking to master his defensive potential, and equally vital for those hoping to dismantle him. As we drift deeper into this exhaustive analysis, let the numbers, ranges, and distances blur into a soothing rhythm, a quiet mechanical heartbeat that pulses gently beneath the surface of the arena. When there are no enemies within his immediate jumping range, the Mega Knight defaults to a heavy, methodical walking state. His movement speed is officially classified as medium, which translates to a slow, rhythmic, lumbering gait across the battlefield tiles. Each step is a deliberate transfer of massive weight. You can almost hear the deep, resonant clanking of his dark iron armor, the heavy padding shifting against his joints, and the solid wrecking balls swaying heavily at his sides with every movement. He does not rush, he does not sprint. He marches forward with the inevitable, crushing certainty of a slow-moving glacier. During this walking state, his internal targeting system is constantly projecting an invisible cone of vision across the arena tiles. This vision system is searching for the first hostile entity to enter his aggression range. Unlike a standard melee unit that simply walks forward until it physically collides with a target, the Mega Knight's targeting logic is uniquely split into two distinct operational modes. The close-quarters melee swing, which requires the enemy to be within his immediate personal space of just over one tile, and the long-range jump, which operates on a completely different set of strict spatial rules. It is this duality, this constant shifting between a slow, lumbering walker and a sudden flying meteor of iron, that creates such immense cognitive pressure on his opponents. The defining characteristic of his jump vector pathing is the strict minimum distance required to initiate the launch sequence. The Mega Knight cannot simply jump straight up and down in place to crush units directly in front of him. His heavy reinforced knee joints and the sheer mass of his upper body armor require a forward trajectory to maintain aerodynamic stability and generate the necessary kinetic force. Mathematically, this minimum distance threshold is set at precisely 3.5 tiles. If an enemy troop steps within this 3.5 tile radius, but is not yet in point-blank melee range, the jump protocol is instantly activated. Interestingly, this specific distance was not always set to 3.5 tiles. In the early days of his arena career, the minimum jump range was set at 4 full tiles. This meant he would often awkwardly walk toward targets that were just slightly too close, failing to utilize his most powerful asset and leaving himself vulnerable to sustained damage. The balancing councils of the realm recognized this inconsistency and smoothed out his mechanics, gently reducing the minimum range to 3.5 tiles to ensure a much more fluid, consistent, and satisfying transition from walking to jumping. This precise number, 3.5 tiles, is a magic distance. It is the invisible tripwire of the arena. When a target crosses that threshold, the heavy, rhythmic marching abruptly stops, and the terrifying wind-up sequence begins. The moment the 3.5 tile threshold is breached, the Mega Knight enters the critical charge-up phase. This is a moment of intense mechanical compression, a brief but vital window of time where all of his forward momentum is suddenly redirected downward into his heavily armored legs. Historically, this charge time has fluctuated, once taking 1.1 seconds before being refined by the balancing councils to a slightly faster 0.9 seconds. During these 9/10 of a second, the entire battlefield seems to hold its breath. He plants his heavy iron boots firmly into the turf, bending his thick knees to lower his center of gravity. You can almost feel the immense pressure building in his hydraulic joints, the creaking of the dark steel plates as they compress under the immense weight of his upper body. His massive wrecking ball hands are drawn back slightly for aerodynamic balance. This visual and auditory windup is designed to be highly telegraphed, a deliberate, slow warning to the opponent that a massive kinetic event is about to occur. It is a moment of profound psychological tension. For the player controlling him, it is a moment of deep satisfaction, the quiet inhale before a thunderous exhale. For the defender, it is a moment of pure panic, a desperate, frantic scramble to deploy a defensive countermeasure before the Iron Titan leaves the ground and the sky goes dark. Once the 0.9-second windup is complete, the stored kinetic energy is violently released. The Mega Knight launches himself into the air, completely breaking physical contact with the spatial grid of the arena floor. In this airborne state, he completely transcends the standard rules of ground engagement. He is no longer walking, he is flying. His trajectory forms a perfect parabolic arc, calculated by his internal telemetry to intersect exactly with the specific tile coordinate where the targeted enemy was standing at the precise moment of launch. as he rises toward the absolute apex of his jump. His heavy iron wrecking balls are raised high above his helmet, casting a massive, terrifying shadow that sweeps over the arena turf. The physics of this flight are deeply fascinating to consider. He is moving hundreds of pounds of solid iron, dark steel, and thick padding through the atmosphere. Yet his flight path is remarkably smooth, almost graceful in its sheer destructive inevitably. While he hangs in the air, he is completely immune to all ground-based obstacles and environmental hazards. He sails effortlessly over the central river, bypassing the stone bridges entirely. He glides silently over the log, completely unaffected by its rolling spikes and horizontal displacement. He becomes a creature of the sky for just a fleeting second, a dark moon eclipsing the sun before the inevitable, crushing descent back to the earth. While the minimum launch distance is strictly governed by the 3.5 tile rule, the maximum reach of his jump extends outward up to a full 5 tiles. This 5-tile maximum boundary creates a fascinating strategic dynamic when interacting with long-range units. A standard musketeer, for example, boasts a shooting range of exactly 6 tiles, while a nimble dart goblin can snipe from 6.5 tiles away. If a musketeer locks onto the Mega Knight from her absolute maximum distance, she is completely safe from his jump trigger. He is forced to lumber slowly forward, absorbing her heavy musket balls with his thick chest plate, until he crosses that invisible 5-tile boundary. The moment he steps onto that 5th tile, the jump sequence is finally triggered. However, an incredibly complex mechanical question arises. What happens if the target moves while he is already in the air? This is where the Mega Knight's targeting telemetry becomes incredibly rigid. Once he initiates the jump and his boots leave the dirt, his destination tile is permanently locked. If he targets a fast-moving unit like a bandit or a raging lumberjack, and that unit sprints quickly away from the intended impact zone during his flight time, he will still land exactly on the original coordinate. He does not possess mid-air homing capabilities. His physical mass is simply too great to alter his trajectory once the kinetic launch has occurred. He will crash heavily down onto an empty tile, his wrecking balls smashing nothing but grass and dirt, while the nimble target escapes entirely unharmed to the outer edges of the arena. Speaking of the bandit, the historical interaction between the Mega Knight's jump vector pathing and the bandit's dash mechanics represents one of the most famous anomalies in the entire history of the arena's physics engine. In the early months following his grand release, if a Mega Knight and a bandit initiated their respective dash and jump sequences at the exact same millisecond, targeting the exact same crown tower, a bizarre spatial glitch would manifest on the board. The bandit, being significantly lighter, faster, and more aerodynamic, would complete her dash and connect with the stone tower first. Fractions of a second later, the massive Mega Knight would land directly behind her. Due to his immense physical mass and the localized knockback effect of his landing impact, his arrival would actually shove the bandit physically backward, pushing her just far enough away from the tower to reset her minimum dash range. The bandit would then instantly initiate another invincible dash, hitting the tower again, while the Mega Knight remained temporarily locked in his landing animation. This created an infinite loop, a mesmerizing, rhythmic cycle of dashing and pushing that completely broke the standard rules of physical engagement. While the architects of the arena eventually patched this anomaly, refining the mass stats and collision boxes to prevent such endless loops, the legend of the Mega Knight and the bandit dancing endlessly at the edge of the Princess Tower remains a cherished piece of deep lore, a testament to the complex, overlapping mathematics of the game's movement code. Another deeply fascinating edge case in his jump vector pathing occurs when his designated target is utterly destroyed while he is in the middle of his wind-up animation. Imagine the Mega Knight crouching down, his knees bent deeply, his iron armor groaning loudly, as he prepares to launch himself at a large cluster of fragile skeletons. Just as he is about to leave the ground and release the kinetic energy, a friendly zap spell strikes suddenly from the sky, vaporizing the skeletons instantly into a cloud of purple elixir. What happens to the kinetic energy stored in his legs? What happens to the launch sequence? The Mega Knight's internal logic is incredibly responsive to board state changes. If the target is eliminated before his boots physically leave the ground, the jump sequence is immediately and safely aborted. The built-up energy is dispersed harmlessly into the turf, he stands back up to his full, towering height, and his targeting cone instantly begins scanning for the next closest enemy to walk toward. However, if the target is destroyed by a Princess Tower arrow or a spell while he is already high in the air, the physical launch cannot be cancelled or recalled. He will complete the full parabolic arc and crash down onto the exact spot where the enemy used to be, delivering his massive 360-degree splash damage to a completely empty patch of grass. This rigid distinction between ground phase cancellation and air phase physical commitment highlights the unyielding laws of kinetic physics that govern his heavy iron armor. When the flight finally concludes, the landing itself is an event of absolute cataclysmic proportions. Unlike a standard melee swing, which only deals damage to the specific unit standing directly in front of him, the jump landing generates a massive 360-degree shockwave of pure concussive force. This splash damage radiates outward in a perfect circle, covering a wide localized radius around the exact impact tile. The exact mathematical value of this jump damage has been the subject of endless debate, frustration, and adjustment throughout the years, famously suffering a massive 25% reduction in 2018 before being slowly and carefully restored by the balancing councils to maintain its fearsome defensive reputation. The true power of this landing is not just found in its raw numerical damage output, but in its ability to simultaneously crush multiple units completely regardless of their exact physical placement within the radius. A well-timed jump will instantly flatten a Night Witch and all of her freshly spawned bats in a single, devastating impact. It will crush charging royal hogs into the dirt, instantly break the wooden shields off royal guards, and severely dent the heavy armor of opposing knights and valkyries. The sound design of this landing moment is equally important to the psychological weight of the card. A deep, bass-heavy, resonant thud that reverberates heavily through the screen, signaling the abrupt, violent end of the enemy's carefully constructed offensive push. For the defending player, understanding the exact tile distances of the Mega Knight's jump vector pathing is the absolute, unquestionable key to basic survival. Because he is fundamentally a melee unit with a highly predictable jump trigger, his movement can be expertly manipulated, pulled, and dragged across the arena grid like a heavy iron puppet on an invisible string. This advanced technique, known universally as kiting, requires absolute mastery of spatial geometry and timing. By placing a low-cost, fragile unit, such as an ice golem or a single solitary skeleton, just at the extreme edge of his vision cone in the opposite lane, a skilled defender can force the Mega Knight to completely alter his pathing. He will lock onto the fragile unit, turning his massive frame, and begin his slow, lumbering walk toward the exact center of the arena. As he eventually approaches the 3.5 tile threshold, he will initiate his wind-up and jump, soaring away from the highly vulnerable Princess Tower and landing harmlessly in the middle of the central kill zone, where both Princess Towers can safely lock on and shoot at his heavy armor simultaneously. The ultimate, crowning expression of this geometric manipulation is the flawless King Tower activation. By using a precise combination of two extremely cheap units, most often a single elixir skeleton squad and an ice spirit, a highly skilled defender can lure the Mega Knight perfectly into the center of the arena, forcing him to alter his jump vector so that he lands precisely onto the steps of the central King Tower. The splash damage of his impact grazes the structure, instantly waking the sleeping king, adding a third powerful defensive cannon to the battlefield, and permanently altering the strategic balance of the entire match in the defender's favor. Achieving this perfect geometric pull requires pixel-perfect tile placement and split-second timing. It is a beautiful, delicate, highly mathematical dance, performed directly in the shadow of a falling, multi-ton iron titan. Let us delve even more deeply into the specific environmental interaction between the jump vector pathing and the arena's central dividing river. The river serves as a massive natural barrier for almost all ground troops, forcing them to awkwardly funnel onto the two narrow wooden or stone bridges. For standard melee units, this creates highly predictable choke points where area of effect spells and splash units can dominate. The Mega Knight, however, completely and utterly ignores this geographical constraint when his jump sequence is triggered. If an enemy unit or building is positioned on the opposite bank of the river, perfectly within his 3.5 to 5 tile range, he does not turn and walk toward the bridge. Instead, his advanced targeting telemetry calculates a direct, linear aerial path straight over the rushing water. This river jumping capability fundamentally alters how lane defense must be approached. An opponent might place a defensive cannon or a sturdy bomb tower exactly in the center of their side of the arena, assuming the river will protect it from immediate melee damage. The Mega Knight shatters this safe assumption entirely. He crouches at the riverbank, the dark steel of his armor reflecting in the water below, and launches himself across the gap in a massive, soaring leap. The water splashes violently as the concussive shockwave of his landing reverberates through the center of the board, instantly destroying the defensive building and opening a clear, unobstructed path directly to the crown tower. The physics of jumping over the river actually require a slightly higher parabolic arc to ensure his heavy iron boots clear the central obstacle, a minute detail hidden deeply within the game's complex physics engine. This extra airborne clearance ensures that he does not snag his heavy armor on the riverbanks, allowing for a perfectly smooth, uninterrupted flight path from one side of the battlefield to the very heart of the opponent's territory. Another deeply complex, often overlooked layer of the jump vector pathing involves the hidden concept of collision density and the target's physical mass. When the Mega Knight lands from his jump, he does not simply deal a flat amount of damage, he physically displaces the units he hits, pushing them outward. However, the game engine calculates this physical displacement based strictly on the hidden mass statistics of the opposing units. A fragile skeleton, consisting of nothing but light, brittle bones, has a very low mass value. When the Mega Knight lands heavily on a cluster of skeletons, they are entirely eradicated, their low mass offering zero physical resistance to his heavy iron strike. Conversely, a unit like the heavy stone golem, or the armored P.E.K.K.A., possesses an incredibly high mass value, anchoring them firmly and resolutely to the spatial grid. When the Mega Knight launches himself into a P.E.K.K.A., the dynamic of the landing changes entirely. The massive shockwave still radiates outward, and the numerical damage is calculated perfectly, but the high-mass target simply does not budge. The P.E.K.K.A. absorbs the immense kinetic energy of the landing, without taking a single step backward, standing her ground, with unyielding, terrifying resilience. This creates a stunning visual and mechanical contrast. The unstoppable kinetic force of the jumping titan, colliding directly with the immovable object of the heavy defender. Understanding these hidden mass calculations is absolutely crucial for predicting the exact board state immediately following a jump impact. If he lands on medium mass units like barbarians or a spinning Valkyrie, they are forcefully shoved backward, interrupting their attack animations and forcing them to re-engage. But against the heavyweights, the Mega Knight must immediately transition from his flying kinetic assault into a grueling, static, point-blank melee brawl, swinging his wrecking balls relentlessly against armor that simply refuses to yield its ground. To fully appreciate the calm, rhythmic nature of his jump in the modern era, we must also trace the historical adjustments made specifically to his wind-up animation speed over the years. In the earliest days of his release, the jump sequence was slightly but noticeably slower, requiring a full 1.1 seconds of wind-up before he could physically leave the ground. This extended preparation time created a slightly sluggish, almost hesitant feel to his overall movement. It gave defenders a wide, highly generous window to react, deploy counters, and pull his pathing away from their towers. For a unit completely designed to be a terrifying, sudden, responsive threat, this long delay felt slightly out of rhythm with his core identity. Recognizing this issue, the developers eventually implemented a subtle but profound mechanical change, permanently accelerating the wind-up to exactly 0.9 seconds. This reduction of 0.2 of a second might seem entirely minuscule, almost imperceptible to the naked eye of a casual observer, but in the highly sensitive, frame-perfect, fast-paced environment of the arena, it changed absolutely everything. The Mega Knight felt noticeably more responsive, far more aggressive, and significantly more fluid in his transitions. The shift from walking to jumping became a seamless, highly explosive motion. The mechanical groan of his armor compressing was shortened, creating a tighter, more rhythmic cadence to his attacks. This specific, careful tuning adjustment remains one of the most critical turning points in his long mechanical history, forever shifting his identity from a slow, lumbering giant into a highly reactive, kinetic force that demands absolute respect and immediate, flawless attention from anyone facing him on the battlefield. It is also entirely necessary to explore the severe limitations of his targeting system, specifically, his complete and total ignorance of the vertical Z-axis. The Mega Knight's vision cone, while highly advanced for calculating horizontal spatial distances along the grid, is strictly limited to the ground layer of the arena. He is fundamentally, entirely incapable of perceiving, targeting, or reacting to airborne units. Minions, rapidly fluttering bats, heavily armored baby dragons, and massive lava hounds can hover directly above his head, unleashing a relentless torrent of fire, sharp claws, and dark elixir directly upon his armor, and he will simply continue to walk slowly forward, entirely oblivious to their presence. His heavy horizontal visor and the massive iron shoulder plates physically restrict his upward visibility, locking his focus entirely and permanently on the dirt, stone, and grass directly beneath his feet. This creates a massive, glaring vulnerability in his otherwise impenetrable defensive profile. Even when he initiates his jump vector pathing and soars high into the air, momentarily occupying the exact same vertical space as the flying units, his collision box simply does not interact with them in any way. He can fly forcefully right through the center of a massive minion horde without disturbing a single delicate wing, crashing down heavily onto a ground target while the flying units remain completely unharmed, calmly following him to finish depleting his health. This strict, unyielding adherence to ground-only targeting forces the player controlling the Mega Knight to carefully construct their deck with ample, reliable anti-air support, relying on musketeers, electro-wizards, or spells to protect the heavy titan from the invisible threats he cannot see. It is a quiet, constant reminder that even the most powerful, unstoppable forces on the ground are entirely powerless against the silent, soaring threats that drift peacefully through the sky above. To truly elevate the application of the jump vector pathing from standard defense to a state of absolute spatial mastery, we must examine its synergy with the Tornado spell. The Tornado is a 3-elixir utility spell that artificially manipulates the physical coordinates of enemy units, dragging them forcefully and helplessly toward the exact center of its swirling vortex. When combined with the Mega Knight's jump mechanics, the result is a devastating, inescapable black hole of pure kinetic destruction. Imagine an opponent executing a wide split-lane push, sending a squad of Royal Hogs down the left lane and a Rapid Bandit down the right. The units are widely separated, seemingly entirely safe from a single, localized splash impact. The defending player, however, maintains complete and total composure. They deploy the Tornado perfectly in the dead center of the arena, its swirling winds grabbing the Royal Hogs and the Bandit, pulling them violently across the tiles, ripping them from their intended paths, and clumping them together into a single, dense, highly overlapping cluster of hitboxes. At the exact moment the Tornado begins its strong pull, the Mega Knight is deployed on the outer edge of the vortex. As the enemies are sucked helplessly into the center, they cross his 3.5 tile activation threshold. He begins his 0.9-second windup, completely unaffected by the howling, chaotic winds of the spell. Just as the Tornado's short duration expires, and the enemy units are perfectly bunched together, trapped directly in the center of the kill zone, the Mega Knight launches into the air. His heavy iron boots come crashing down directly into the dead center of the cluster, delivering maximum 360-degree splash damage to every single unit simultaneously. The synergy between the pulling force of the spell and the targeted, leaping mass of the armor creates an inescapable trap, a masterclass in manipulating the grid to maximize the absolute efficiency of his area of effect capabilities. Another deeply atmospheric, almost serene interaction occurs when the jump vector pathing intersects with cryogenic anomalies, specifically the freezing touch of the Ice Spirit, the Ice Golem's lingering Death Nova, or the ultimate stopping force of the Freeze spell. The Mega Knight's mechanics are built entirely upon momentum, pacing, and kinetic release, making the sudden application of absolute zero temperatures a jarring, fascinating interruption of his rhythmic flow. If a freeze spell is dropped exactly on him during his slow, lumbering walking state, the heavy iron plates of his armor instantly frost over, locking his massive joints completely in place and halting his march entirely. The deep, rumbling clank of his footsteps goes completely silent, replaced instantly by the quiet, cracking sound of ice crystals forming rapidly on his dark steel visor. He remains perfectly still for the full duration of the spell, a frozen, silent monument to defensive power. However, the most visually striking and mechanically interesting interaction occurs if the freeze spell connects exactly during his 0.9-second wind-up phase. If he has already bent his knees and initiated the hydraulic compression for the launch, the sudden freeze locks him in a permanent crouch, his massive wrecking balls suspended motionless halfway through their backward swing. He is trapped perfectly in a state of maximum kinetic potential, a heavy coiled spring frozen completely solid. Once the icy grip of the spell shatters and thaws, the stored energy does not dissipate. The animation instantly resumes from the exact frame it was paused. The spring violently uncoils, the remaining fractions of a second complete, and he launches into the air with all of his original fury. But what if the freeze spell is timed so perfectly, so impossibly precisely, that it strikes him while he is already fully airborne? Due to the complex physics engine governing verticality and status effects, a mid-air Mega Knight is completely immune to the freeze spell's area of effect on the ground layer. The icy blast washes over the tiles far below him, freezing the grass and any units caught in the radius. But the flying Iron Titan sails right over the frozen zone, his momentum entirely unaffected, carrying him peacefully toward his inevitable, crushing landing. While the freeze spell provides a hard, complete stop to his momentum, the localized chill of the Ice Wizard introduces a different, much more grueling challenge to his mechanics: the slow, creeping lethargy of cold magic. The Ice Wizard's attacks do not freeze units solid. Instead, they coat them in a lingering, magical frost that reduces both their movement speed and attack speed by exactly 35%. When the Mega Knight is caught in this chilling aura, his already slow, lumbering gait becomes agonizingly sluggish. The rhythmic pacing of his walk stretches out, every step requiring immense, highly visible effort to overcome the freezing friction in his heavy joints. But the most significant impact of this slow effect is exactly how it manipulates the jump vector pathing. The 3.5 tile minimum threshold and the 5 tile maximum range remain completely unchanged, as they are hard-coded spatial parameters. However, the crucial 0.9 second wind-up animation is subjected entirely to the 35% speed reduction. When heavily chilled, the Mega Knight takes significantly longer to compress his armor and prepare for the launch. The knees bend in extreme slow motion, the armor groans with a deep, distorted pitch, and the window of vulnerability is left wide open for the defender to react. This heavily extended charge time can mean the absolute difference between a successful, crushing leap and being slowly whittled away by opposing archers before his boots ever leave the ground. It is a quiet, freezing struggle, a deeply visual battle of raw, kinetic energy, fighting against the slow, creeping lethargy of winter magic, emphasizing exactly just how fragile the rhythm of his movement can be when subjected to elemental disruption. Conversely, while ice and cold can severely disrupt his mechanics, the Mega Knight stands proudly as one of the very few units in the arena capable of largely ignoring the physical displacement of the log. The log is a legendary spell known for its unique, localized knockback effect, capable of physically shoving almost every ground unit in the entire game backward by exactly one tile, breaking their formations and instantly resetting their attack animations. However, the Mega Knight's incredibly high mass value, the exact same hidden stat that firmly anchors him against other displacements, interacts uniquely with the rolling spiked timber. If the log strikes him directly while he is in his standard walking state, the immense, unyielding weight of his dark iron armor absorbs the vast majority of the impact force. He is not shoved backward a full tile like a fragile musketeer or a lightweight bandit. Instead, he suffers a very slight, almost imperceptible stutter in his step. The log violently shatters against his heavy boots, dealing its standard numerical damage, but his forward momentum is barely interrupted. Even more impressively, if the log rolls directly under him while he is in the exact middle of his 0.9 second wind-up phase, the massive downward compression of his weight entirely negates the knockback effect completely. He remains firmly and resolutely rooted to the turf, his charge completely uninterrupted, allowing him to launch into the air exactly as if the legendary spell never even touched him. This unyielding physical mass is exactly what makes him such a terrifying, unstoppable force on the ground. He is a walking iron fortress that simply refuses to be bullied, pushed, or shoved off his intended path. He dictates the spatial positioning of the battlefield entirely on his own terms, brushing off minor physical disruptions with the cold, heavy certainty of solid iron. Let us now close our eyes and visualize the perfect sequence, the ultimate, flawless realization of the jump vector pathing in real time. Imagine the opponent committing to a massive, overwhelming offensive push. A giant leads the way, followed closely by a night witch, her bats swirling chaotically in the air, and a lumberjack sprinting frantically from behind, his axe raised. The push crosses the bridge, a chaotic, loud, and terrifying assembly of magic and muscle. The defender remains perfectly calm. They drag the Mega Knight's card from their hand, the dark silhouette hovering quietly over the arena. They wait for the exact perfect millisecond, waiting patiently for the cluster of troops to tightly group together. The deployment sound echoes, a massive, thunderous crash. The Mega Knight lands directly on top of the Night Witch, instantly vaporizing her and her summoned bats with the initial spawn impact. The Giant and the Lumberjack are shoved outward by the 2.2 tile concussive wave. Before they can even recover their footing and resume their march, the Mega Knight locks onto the Lumberjack. The spatial distance is perfectly measured, exactly 4 tiles. The 0.9-second windup begins. The heavy iron knees bend. The dark steel armor groans under the immense pressure. The kinetic energy is loaded, and he launches smoothly into the air. The parabolic arc is completely flawless, a beautiful mathematical curve set against the chaos of the battlefield. He hangs in the air for a fraction of a second, a silent, heavy shadow, before crashing down directly onto the Lumberjack, flattening him instantly into the dirt and leaving nothing but a spilled bottle of rage spell in his wake. The sequence is completely flawless, a highly rhythmic, mechanical destruction that turns overwhelming noise and chaos into quiet, peaceful, empty space. This is the true, underlying essence of the Mega Knight. It is not about rage, and it is not about chaos. It is about cold, highly calculated, vector-driven certainty. Let the mathematical certainty of his movements, the highly predictable, rhythmic thud of his landings, and the steady clearing of the battlefield wash over you. There is no push he cannot stop, no swarm he cannot crush, and no tile distance he cannot cross. Rest easy, knowing the Iron Titan is on the board, constantly guarding the lanes, and leaping gracefully through the quiet, darkened arena, turning the complex geometry of the battlefield into a perfectly orchestrated symphony of deep, restful silence. To fully comprehend the sheer psychological weight of the Mega Knight, one must venture far beyond the polished, hyper-calculated, mathematically perfect realm of top-tier competitive play. We must descend into the shadowy, chaotic, and densely populated ecosystem of the Clash Royale universe, known universally as Mid-Ladder. Mid-Ladder is not simply a geographical location on the trophy road, nor is it strictly defined by a specific number of crowns or a particular arena skin. It is, fundamentally, a psychological state of play. It is a sprawling, unpredictable purgatory, where raw emotion dictates strategy, where elixir management is frequently abandoned in favor of blind aggression, and where the delicate, underlying geometry of the arena is entirely ignored. In this untamed wilderness, standard meta decks dissolve into bizarre, heavy, unrecognizable combinations of expensive cards. It is a place of unrefined chaos, and it is precisely within this environment that the heavy Iron Titan transcends his role as a simple 7-elixir defensive tank and transforms into a figure of absolute, paralyzing, community-wide terror. The environment of Mid-Ladder is the perfect, fertile breeding ground for the Mega Knight's specific brand of kinetic destruction. To understand why he rules this tier with such an iron fist, we must carefully examine the foundational habits of the casual player. The most common, recurring mistake made by players trapped within this psychological bracket is the overwhelming desire to build massive, unstoppable, all-in offensive pushes directly at the river bridge. In the heat of the moment, driven by the adrenaline of the match, a mid-ladder player will frequently clump all of their support units together. They will deploy a heavy tank, perhaps a giant or an elite barbarian duo, and immediately crowd the space directly behind them with fragile, high-damage support units. A wizard, a witch, perhaps a tightly packed squad of musketeers. They pour 10, 12, sometimes 15 drops of precious purple elixir into a single, localized cluster, convinced that the sheer volume of troops will overwhelm the opponent's defenses through raw, unmitigated brute force. When this massive, tightly packed, heavily invested push crosses the stone bridge, the opposing player, the one holding the Mega Knight quietly in their hand, simply smiles. There is a deep, predatory satisfaction in watching an opponent overcommit so drastically. The defender does not panic. They do not frantically cycle through cheap units. They simply drag the heavy, dark silhouette of the Mega Knight over the screen, letting it hover peacefully, right above the exact center of the incoming swarm. For a fraction of a second, the shadow of the Royal Transport blimp falls over the densely packed troops. The mid-ladder attacker, realizing their catastrophic error of spatial positioning, experiences a sudden, cold wave of absolute dread, but it is already too late. The deployment sound echoes through the stadium, a massive, thunderous, cataclysmic crash. The 7 Elixir Titan plummets from the sky, his iron boots colliding with the dirt in a perfect, devastating 2.2 tile concussive shockwave. In a single, violent millisecond, the entire 15 Elixir investment is utterly vaporized. The witch is crushed instantly into a cloud of purple dust. The wizard is flattened before he can cast a single fireball. The elite barbarians are shoved backward, their health bars instantly reduced to a sliver, their momentum completely shattered by the sheer mass of the iron drop. The entire right lane, which just moments ago was a terrifying display of offensive power, is now perfectly silent, completely empty, save for the towering, dark steel figure of the Mega Knight, rising slowly from the crater. This exact interaction, the instantaneous, brutal punishment of clumped troops and poor spatial awareness, is the beating heart of the mid-ladder trauma. It creates an incredible, crushing elixir deficit. The attacker has spent all their resources, completely draining their elixir bar, and has absolutely nothing to show for it. Worse still, they now face a nearly full health, 7 Elixir juggernaut, slowly lumbering toward their own highly vulnerable, undefended Princess Tower. Driven by the sheer, addictive satisfaction of executing these massive, game-ending defensive drops, the mid-ladder ecosystem has given rise to a deeply frustrating phenomenon, the over-leveled Mega Knight. Because the card provides such immense, immediate value to newer or less experienced players, they tend to focus all of their economic resources entirely upon him. Every legendary wildcard, every trade token, every book of books, and every spare piece of gold is funneled directly into upgrading his dark iron armor. This creates a deeply warped mathematical reality on the battlefield. A player with level 11 or 12 crown towers will frequently find themselves facing a completely maxed out, level 14 or 15 Mega Knight. This level discrepancy distorts the fundamental physics of the game's interactions. A maxed Mega Knight survives defensive counters that by all mathematical rights should completely destroy him. He absorbs direct hits from an equivalent mini P.E.K.K.A. and simply keeps walking. He completely ignores the protective arrows of the Princess Tower, treating them like tiny, insignificant raindrops bouncing harmlessly off his thick steel visor. This artificial inflation of his stats makes an already punishing card feel completely, overwhelmingly unstoppable to the under-leveled defender. When faced with this massive, over-leveled iron threat marching slowly down the lane, the mid-ladder player frequently succumbs to the second defining symptom of the terror, the panic defense. Because they do not fully understand the rigid mathematical rules of the jump vector pathing or the 3.5 tile minimum activation range, they act entirely out of fear. As the Mega Knight crosses the bridge, the terrified defender will frantically drop a skeleton army directly onto his face. This is a catastrophic, fundamental misunderstanding of his mechanics. The Mega Knight does not swing a single sword. He swings 2 massive area of effect wrecking balls. Before the delicate little skeletons can even raise their tiny swords to strike his armor, he slowly raises his heavy iron fists and sweeps them inward in a broad, crushing arc. In a single, heavy thud, all 15 skeletons are instantly erased from the grid. The 3 elixir spent on the defense is completely wasted, and the Mega Knight continues his slow, lumbering march, entirely unbothered, perfectly healthy, and now significantly closer to the Princess Tower. When the ground swarms fail, the panicked mid-ladder player often turns to the sky, desperately deploying a minion horde to swarm his helmet. While this is tactically sound, as the Mega Knight cannot target flying units, it is almost always anticipated by the attacker. Knowing perfectly well that their heavy tank is vulnerable from above, the Mega Knight player will have already prepared their supporting spells. The moment the minion horde appears, a volley of arrows, or a perfectly timed zap spell, streaks across the sky, wiping out the fragile blue creatures and leaving the Iron Titan completely free to reach the tower. Once he connects with the stone structure, the destruction is rapid and merciless. He raises his heavy wrecking balls and pounds away at the masonry, each strike taking massive, painful chunks out of the tower's health bar. The sound of his fists hitting the stone is a rhythmic, punishing drumbeat of inevitable defeat, driving the defending player deeper into a state of deep, tilted frustration. This endless cycle of panic and destruction gives rise to the classic, universally despised mid-ladder offensive formation, the Mega Knight, backed immediately by heavy splash support. Because the Mega Knight himself struggles to quickly eliminate high-health single targets like a Knight or a Valkyrie, mid-ladder players will frequently deploy a Wizard, a Witch, or an Executioner directly behind him. This creates a slow-moving, heavily armored wall of absolute area of effect destruction. The Mega Knight tanks all the incoming damage, absorbing hits with his massive health pool, while the wizard hurls fireballs over his shoulder, instantly incinerating any defensive swarms or flying units the opponent tries to play. For a casual player who has not yet mastered the art of unit separation, pulling, or kiting, this combination appears to be a completely uncrackable code. It feels less like a strategic puzzle, and more like an unfair, rolling avalanche of high-level stats, designed specifically to ruin their day. The psychological toll of facing this exact, repetitive composition match after match, day after day, breeds a deep, festering resentment within the casual community. The forums, the comment sections, and the post-match emotes are filled with a continuous, burning outrage. The card takes no skill, it ruins the game. It provides too much value for placing a single unit. This outcry is not based on top-level competitive statistics, where the card frequently hovers around a perfectly average or even below-average win rate. The outcry is entirely emotional. It is born from the deeply personal frustration of having your carefully constructed, perfectly timed offensive push completely obliterated by a single, brainless, 7 elixir drop from the sky. The Mega Knight forces the casual player to confront their own bad habits, their poor spacing, their terrible elixir management, and their over-reliance on clustered support troops. And people fundamentally resent the unit that punishes their flaws so brutally and consistently. This massive, roaring wave of community anger eventually reached the high stone towers of the developers, forcing the balancing councils into a nearly impossible, deeply unenviable situation. They had to somehow calm the raging fires of mid-ladder without completely destroying the card's viability in professional, high-stakes tournaments. This delicate tightrope walk culminated in the infamous balance update of April 2022. Yielding to years of relentless complaints, the developers enacted a massive, sweeping 20% reduction to his spawn damage. They stripped away the very thing that made him so terrifying, his ability to instantly vaporize medium health support units upon landing. The goal was to force players to use him more strategically, relying on his jump mechanics and consistent melee swings, rather than simply using him as an incredibly fat, armored fireball. In the highly refined, mathematically perfect realm of top-ladder play, this 20% damage reduction was absolutely devastating. Professional players abandoned the card entirely, as it could no longer reliably neutralize pushes for a positive elixir trade. His usage rate among the elite plummeted. However, down in the chaotic, sprawling depths of mid-ladder, the nerf changed absolutely nothing. The casual players did not care about the 20% mathematical reduction. They did not notice that the Royal Hogs survived with a sliver more health, or that the Zappies required an extra swing to destroy. They simply continued to play him exactly as they always had, dropping him directly on top of massive, poorly spaced swarms, because his fundamental, underlying mechanic, the heavily armored, area of effect splash damage, remained the ultimate, easiest answer to the unrefined bridge spam of their peers. The Mega Knight proved to be completely immune to statistical nerfs, precisely because his true power is not found in a spreadsheet. His true power is found in the psychological dread he inflicts upon the inexperienced mind. To truly escape the gravitational pull of mid-ladder, a player must undergo a fundamental, permanent shift in their perception of the Mega Knight. They must stop seeing him as a terrifying, unpredictable monster, and begin to see him for what he truly is: a rigid, highly predictable, easily manipulated piece of clockwork machinery. He is not a demon, he is a geometric puzzle. When a player transitions into the higher tiers of the arena, the fear simply washes away, replaced by a cold, calculating understanding of the grid. Top-level players do not panic when the blimp shadow falls over their troops. They anticipate it. They intentionally bait out the drop, sacrificing a small, cheap push to force the opponent to spend their 7 elixir, only to catch the heavy titan in a perfectly designed, highly efficient defensive trap. This transition is marked by the complete mastery of the kite. Instead of dropping a massive, expensive defense directly in front of his face, the enlightened player waits patiently until the Mega Knight crosses the bridge. They calmly place a 2 elixir ice golem squarely in the center of the arena, perfectly positioned, just at the very edge of his 3.5 tile vision cone. The Mega Knight, governed entirely by his strict, unyielding targeting telemetry, turns away from the vulnerable Princess Tower and begins to lumber slowly toward the center. As the ice golem walks peacefully into the opposite lane, the Mega Knight follows, dragged helplessly across the kill zone by an invisible string, while both princess towers lock onto his heavy armor, slowly melting his health pool away with a steady stream of arrows. A 7-elixir terror is completely neutralized by a 2-elixir snowball with legs. Once this mechanical revelation occurs, the entire facade of the mid-ladder terror shatters into a million pieces. The Mega Knight loses his power over the mind. He becomes a known quantity, a slow, heavy, deeply flawed unit that can be endlessly distracted, pulled, and activated against the King Tower with a perfectly placed combination of 1-elixir skeletons and an ice spirit. He transforms from an unstoppable juggernaut into a massive, lumbering liability for the opponent who plays him poorly. In this way, the Mega Knight is actually the ultimate, benevolent teacher of Clash Royale. He is the strict, unforgiving gatekeeper of high-level play. He stands firmly at the border between chaos and strategy, ensuring that absolutely no one is allowed to climb into the prestigious upper arenas until they have learned the fundamental lessons of spatial spacing, elixir management, and geometric kiting. So, as you lie there, drifting slowly into a deep, peaceful sleep, let go of the frustration. Let the memories of the crushed pushes, the vaporized skeletons, and the heavy, thudding impacts fade away into the quiet darkness of the arena. Do not fear the shadow of the blimp. Do not resent the heavy iron boots. The Mega Knight is not a monster designed to ruin your day. He is simply a test, a predictable, rhythmic, deeply misunderstood machine, constantly searching for a target. Understand his rules, respect his distances, and watch peacefully as he leaps harmlessly into the center of the board, his kinetic fury completely neutralized by the quiet, mathematical certainty of your defense. Let the heavy, rhythmic clanking of his armor become a soothing metronome, a slow, steady pulse that guides you away from the chaotic noise of mid-ladder and gently down into the quiet, perfect stillness of rest. To truly understand the operational reality of the Mega Knight, one must look beyond his dark iron armor, his traumatic backstory, and his kinetic jump physics, and examine the cold, invisible fluid that dictates every single moment of life within the Clash Royale arena: elixir. Elixir is the fundamental currency of battle, the glowing purple blood that flows continuously into a king's bank at a steady, unyielding rhythm. Every card in the game represents a specific economic investment, a transaction where spent elixir is converted into physical mass, magical force, or strategic positioning on the grid. In this complex, fast-paced financial ecosystem, the Mega Knight occupies a distinctly heavy economic tier. Priced at a staggering 7 units of elixir, he represents one of the most substantial single-card investments a player can make in a live match. To appreciate the gravity of a 7-elixir price tag, consider the strict physical constraints of the elixir bank itself. A player can hold a maximum reserve of exactly 10 elixir at any given moment. Deploying the Mega Knight requires allocating 70% of your entire maximum economic capacity in a single, instantaneous decision. This leaves the player with a remaining bank of just 3 elixir, a paper-thin economic cushion that offers virtually zero margin for error. If the investment fails to yield immediate, decisive value on the board, the player is left economically bankrupt, completely exposed to rapid counterattacks in the opposite lane. Thus, the decision to drop the Mega Knight is never a casual choice. It is a high-stakes financial gamble, a massive macroeconomic transaction that immediately alters the momentum and resource balance of the entire match. The primary economic justification for this colossal 7-elixir expenditure lies in his unique capacity to generate massive positive elixir trades on defense. In the language of Clash Royale strategy, an elixir trade measures the net efficiency of an interaction, subtracting the cost of the defensive response from the total cost of the opponent's incoming push. A standard single-target unit, such as a knight or a mini P.E.K.K.A., can cleanly eliminate an opposing threat of equal or slightly greater value, yielding a modest positive trade of 1 or 2 elixir. The Mega Knight, however, operates on an entirely different scale of economic efficiency. Because his initial spawn deployment functions as a heavy area of effect impact, followed immediately by broad, cleaving melee sweeps, he is designed to dismantle entire clusters of troops simultaneously. Imagine a scenario where an opponent constructs a classic mid-cost offensive push, crossing the river bridge. They deploy a Hog Rider for 4 elixir, back it up with a Musketeer for 4 elixir, and protect the push with a tight squad of 3 elixir goblins. The total cost of this incoming assault is 11 units of purple elixir. The defending player calmly waits until the entire group converges at the bridge, then drops the Mega Knight directly onto the cluster for 7 elixir. The concussive shockwave of his landing instantly obliterates the 3 elixir goblins and heavily damages both the musketeer and the hog rider. With 2 broad sweeps of his wrecking ball fists, the remaining units are wiped from the grid. The defender has successfully defended an 11 elixir offensive push using a single 7 elixir deployment, instantly creating a net gain of +4 elixir in raw defensive trade value. However, the economic analysis does not end with the immediate cleanup of the enemy push. The true genius of the Mega Knight's cost structure is revealed in the concept of counter-push valuation. When a spell like a fireball or a rocket is used to eliminate an incoming group of troops, the elixir spent on that spell vanishes entirely once the impact concludes. It leaves 0 physical presence on the battlefield. The Mega Knight, by contrast, is a living, breathing, high-health unit that survives the initial defensive interaction. After completely neutralizing the opponent's 11 elixir push, the Mega Knight stands in the lane with 80 or 90% of his massive health bar still intact. From an economic perspective, this surviving unit represents retained value. The 7 elixir originally invested was fully paid off by destroying the enemy's 11 elixir push. Therefore, the surviving, heavily armored Titan, lumbering across the river into the opponent's territory, is effectively a free 7 elixir threat. The opponent, having just spent 11 elixir on an assault that yielded 0 tower damage, now finds themselves critically low on resources while facing a nearly full health splash tank marching directly toward their crown tower. To survive, the opponent is forced to spend even more elixir on defense, plunging deeper into an economic deficit. This seamless transition from a high-value defensive spell into a towering, full-health counter-push is the ultimate expression of splash tank economics, a force multiplier that systematically drains the opponent's bank while maintaining absolute control over the tempo of the game. To maximize this economic engine, a skilled player must master the delicate art of economic patience. The greatest danger when playing a 7 elixir card is the temptation to deploy him prematurely. Dropping a Mega Knight on a light, 2 elixir threat, such as a solitary spear goblin squad or a lone ice spirit, is an economic disaster. Spending 7 elixir to neutralize 2 elixir results in an immediate -5 trade, leaving the player with an empty bank and 0 counter-push value. The Mega Knight must be hoarded, held quietly in hand like an unexploded ordnance, until the opponent invests heavily enough to justify his deployment cost. The player must willingly absorb minor amounts of tower damage, patiently allowing the opponent to commit more and more resources across the river, waiting for the precise moment when the accumulated value of the target cluster exceeds the 7 elixir threshold. Furthermore, the economic viability of the Mega Knight transforms dramatically as a match progresses through its structural time phases. During the first 2 minutes of a match, the single elixir period, elixir regenerates at a rate of 1 unit every 2.8 seconds. In this slow economic environment, spending 7 elixir is a massive, deliberate action that leaves your reserves depleted for several seconds. A single misplay or missed landing can spell immediate defeat, as your elixir bar refills too slowly to defend a swift push in the opposite lane. Consequently, top-tier players often play the Mega Knight sparingly during single elixir time, relying on cheaper defensive cycles and using the Titan only as an emergency response to massive overcommitments. When the match reaches the final minute and enters double elixir time, the generation rate doubles, producing 1 unit of elixir every 1.4 seconds. In triple elixir time during sudden death, elixir flows like a raging river, generating a unit every 0.7 seconds. As the economic pace accelerates, the relative risk of the 7 elixir cost shrinks significantly. A depleted bank refills in a matter of moments, allowing the player to deploy the Mega Knight repeatedly, layering multiple splash tanks into the lanes while constantly backing them up with cheap, high-damage support units. In these late-game stages, the Mega Knight turns from a surgical, high-value defensive answer into an overwhelming, continuous wall of kinetic pressure that smothers the opponent's economic capacity to defend. Ultimately, the Mega Knight is a masterclass in financial strategy, disguised as an iron brute. He rewards macroeconomic discipline, spatial patience, and precise trade calculation, while ruthlessly punishing reckless spending and poor resource allocation. Every time his boots crash down onto the arena floor, it is not merely a display of raw physical force. It is the execution of a cold, highly calculated economic transaction that reshapes the financial balance of the match, paving a clear, unstoppable path to ultimate victory. Chapter 8. To build a truly formidable deck around the Mega Knight, one must first dismantle one of the most persistent and devastating misconceptions in all of Clash Royale deck building: the illusion that the Mega Knight is a win condition. To the novice or the untrained observer, his imposing physical size, his 7 elixir cost, and his devastating jump landing make him appear as though he ought to be the centerpiece of an entire offensive strategy. However, relying on the Mega Knight to single-handedly destroy an opponent's crown tower is a recipe for strategic ruin. Because he possesses ground-only targeting, a slow attack cadence, and an inherent susceptibility to low-cost kiting, any competent defender can neutralize an isolated Mega Knight for a massive positive elixir trade using nothing more than a 2 elixir Ice Golem, a 3 elixir Knight, or a well-placed central building. The true deck-building philosophy of the Mega Knight rests upon understanding his actual identity. He is an anchor. He is a massive, walking defensive fortress that converts incoming enemy pushes into surviving, high-health counter-pushing mass. He does not breach towers on his own. Rather, he creates a terrifying, high-priority distraction that demands the opponent's immediate, heavy investment. Consequently, a master deck builder never asks, "How can my Mega Knight reach the tower?" Instead, they ask, "What fast, punishing, high-damage win conditions can I pair with the Mega Knight so that when he steps across the river and absorbs all the opponent's attention, my secondary threats can silently tear the crown tower to pieces?" This core philosophy gives rise to one of the most famous, resilient, and ubiquitous deck archetypes in tournament history: Mega Knight wall breakers, often referred to in competitive circles as Make WB. This archetype is an absolute masterclass in tactical synergy, fusing the heavy, immovable defensive weight of the 7 elixir splash tank with the ultra-fast, high-pressure, low-cost lethality of 2 elixir wall breakers and a 3 elixir miner. The operational cadence of this deck relies on creating impossible dual-lane dilemmas, strategic forks where the opponent is forced to split their defensive resources unevenly across the arena grid, making a fatal error in calculation almost inevitable. Consider the mechanical rhythm of a typical Mega Knight wallbreaker cycle. In the defensive phase, the player uses cheap, highly versatile cycle cards like Spear Goblins, Bats, or a Bandit to chip away at incoming units and control the pace of the match. When the opponent eventually commits to a heavy push, the Mega Knight drops from the sky, crushing the assault and converting directly into a full-health counter-push in the left lane. As the heavy titan crosses the river, the opponent is legally obligated to respond. They drop a mini P.E.K.K.A. or a Valkyrie in front of the Mega Knight to stop his progress, spending 4 or 5 elixir in the process. At that exact millisecond, while the opponent's elixir bank is completely depleted and their defensive attention is hyper-focused on the left lane, the Mega Knight player strikes with lethal speed. They drop a miner directly behind the right side crown tower to pull its targeting lock, and instantly unleash a pair of 2 elixir wall breakers sprinting down the right lane. The wall breakers, running unhindered at blinding speed, lock onto the defenseless right tower and detonate their explosive barrels, dealing massive structural damage for a trivial cost. The opponent finds themselves trapped in a nightmare. They spent all their resources managing the heavy iron monster on the left, only to lose half the health of their right tower to a 4 elixir secondary strike. This relentless, dual-lane split pressure is the lifeblood of the archetype, turning the Mega Knight's heavy presence into an inescapable optical illusion that blinds the defender to the true threats sneaking in through the side doors. A closely related, equally devastating variant is the Mega Knight Ram Bait archetype, sometimes referred to as Ram Bait or Spell Bait hybrid. In this construction, the Mega Knight is paired with medium-cost, high-velocity charge units, such as the Ram Rider, the Bandit, the Royal Ghost, or the Dark Prince, alongside flying anti-tank threats like the Inferno Dragon. The core strategic goal of this deck is to exhaust the opponent's single-target damage sources and reset spells. Units like the Ram Rider and the Inferno Dragon demand immediate, specific answers, usually a heavy building, an Electro Wizard, or small reset spells like Zap and Snowball. In a Ram Bait operational loop, the Mega Knight acts as the ultimate shield for charging threats. When the Ram Rider is deployed behind a surviving Mega Knight, her snaring bola immobilizes incoming ground defenders, preventing them from moving or repositioning, while the Mega Knight leaps directly onto them to deliver fatal splash damage. If the opponent uses their reset spells or single-target tank killers to neutralize an incoming Inferno Dragon or a sprinting bandit, they are left completely defenseless when the Mega Knight counterpush arrives. The deck creates a continuous, overwhelming wave of high-threat targets, where every single card demands an immediate, specific counterspell, systematically exhausting the opponent's deck cycle until their defenses completely collapse under the sheer weight of overlapping pressure. However, no master of the Mega Knight can claim true strategic enlightenment without confronting their absolute darkest, most terrifying nightmare on the battlefield, the P.E.K.K.A. matchup. The interaction between the Mega Knight and the P.E.K.K.A. is widely considered one of the most hard-coded, unforgiving counter relationships in the entire game. Where the Mega Knight is a master of area of effect splash damage, designed to clear swarms, the P.E.K.K.A. is a singular, heavy samurai, built for absolute, uncompromising single-target destruction. Her dual-rune swords deliver massive, soul-crushing blows that carve through the Mega Knight's thick steel plates like butter. In a direct, head-to-head, point-blank 1v1 duel on neutral ground, a full-health P.E.K.K.A. will completely obliterate a full-health Mega Knight, leaving the duel with well over 40% of her health bar remaining. When an inexperienced Mega Knight player encounters a P.E.K.K.A. deck, especially classic P.E.K.K.A. Bridges spam, featuring the Battle Ram, Electro Wizard, and Magic Archer, their initial instinct is often one of pure panic. If they drop their 7 Elixir Titan directly onto a P.E.K.K.A., they are effectively donating 7 units of Elixir directly to the opponent's defensive bank. To survive and prevail in this brutal matchup, the Mega Knight player must execute an entirely different tactical playbook based on avoidance, positional misdirection, and strict cycle tracking. The golden rule of the P.E.K.K.A. matchup is simple. Never allow your Mega Knight to make physical contact with the P.E.K.K.A. If the opponent deploys a P.E.K.K.A. behind their King Tower, the Mega Knight player must immediately abandon all plans of pushing that same lane. Instead, they must initiate a high-speed pressure assault in the opposite lane using their cheaper win conditions, such as a minor wall breakers combo or a fast bandit sprint. This forces the P.E.K.K.A. player to either split their resources defensively or drop support units in the opposite lane, separating the samurai from her backing troops. When the defensive P.E.K.K.A. eventually crosses the river into the Mega Knight's territory, she must be handled exclusively with low-cost distraction units. A 3 Elixir Knight placed in the center of the arena, supported by 2 Elixir Bats hovering above her head, can pull the slow, lumbering samurai into the central kill zone where both Princess Towers can fire upon her. The Mega Knight is reserved strictly for the support troops trailing behind her. The player waits for the P.E.K.K.A. to walk far ahead, then drops the Mega Knight. Behind, the samurai, directly onto the Electro Wizard, the Bandit, or the Royal Ghost, following in her wake. The drop vaporizes the support network in a single concussive shockwave, while cheap swarms kite the isolated P.E.K.K.A. into oblivion. Outplaying a hard counter like the P.E.K.K.A. requires suppressing the urge to use raw force, replacing it with surgical positional discipline that turns the opponent's 7 Elixir Samurai into a slow, harmless, endlessly distracted giant. A completely different set of tactical adjustments is required when facing massive, slow-building beatdown archetypes, such as Golem, Lava Hound, or Electro Giant decks. Beatdown players operate on an economic strategy of extreme patience. They gladly surrender early tower health, sacrifice minor trades during single elixir time, and quietly hoard resources until double elixir time, where they drop an 8 elixir golem behind their king tower and construct a terrifying 40 elixir push consisting of a night witch, a baby dragon, a lumberjack, and a mega minion. Against a fully formed golem push, dropping the Mega Knight directly onto the golem itself is a grave mistake. The golem possesses far too much physical health for the Mega Knight's low single-target DPS to make a meaningful dent, while the backline support units rain down endless magical and physical damage from behind. The correct operational technique is known as the backline sever. The Mega Knight player allows the slow, rocky golem to cross the river unmolested, locking onto the crown tower or a central building. The instant the trailing support units, the Night Witch, the Lumberjack, and the support troops cross the stone bridge, the Mega Knight drops from the sky directly on top of them. The 2.2 tile landing impact instantly destroys the spawned bats, crushes the Night Witch, and interrupts the Lumberjack's attack animation, severing the head of the push from its body. Once the high-damage backline support is erased, the slow, harmless golem can be calmly cleaned up by a single Inferno Dragon or a simple swarm unit. When facing the soaring terror of a Lava Hound deck, the Mega Knight player faces a unique mechanical dilemma. The Lava Hound flies through the sky, completely immune to every single aspect of the Mega Knight's ground-based kit. In this matchup, the Mega Knight transforms from a defensive reactive tool into an aggressive macroeconomic hammer. The moment the opponent invests 8 elixir into deploying a slow Lava Hound at the absolute back corner of the map, their elixir bank is completely drained, leaving them with just 2 units of elixir. Instead of waiting passively for the aerial threat to reach their side of the arena, the Mega Knight player immediately drops their 7 elixir Titan at the river bridge in the 7. Opposite lane, backed by fast support troops. Because the Lava Hound player has 0 elixir left to defend, the sudden, explosive appearance of a full-health Mega Knight marching directly toward their undefended Princess Tower creates pure panic. They are forced to awkwardly scramble, dropping fragile, suboptimal ground units to prevent their tower from being completely demolished. This aggressive opposite lane punishment completely destroys the opponent's ability to build a proper aerial push, forcing them to spend all their resources defending their land, while their solitary Lava Hound drifts harmlessly over the river to be easily picked off by a lone musketeer or mega minion. Even against the electrical terror of the Electro Giant, whose high-voltage aura reflects damage back to any unit striking him within his ring of electricity, the Mega Knight finds a highly specialized, nuanced role. While the Mega Knight takes reflected damage if he swings his wrecking balls directly at the Electro Giant, his heavy landing impact and high physical mass allow him to forcefully push the Electro Giant backward, briefly resetting the Giant's pathing and knocking him out of range of delicate defensive buildings or crown towers. Paired with a resetting card like an Electro Spirit or a Zappies squad, the Mega Knight acts as an immovable physical wall, absorbing the initial shock of the push while maintaining strict control over spatial positioning. Through every matchup, every archetype, and every strategic trial, a single underlying truth remains constant. The Mega Knight is a master of tactical versatility. He is a shapeshifter on the grid, capable of acting as an explosive defensive spell, a massive physical tank, a dual-lane distraction engine, or an aggressive opposite-lane punisher, depending entirely on the demands of the board state. He rewards the player who approaches the game with deep macroeconomic awareness, split-second spatial judgment, and absolute emotional composure under pressure. So, as the long, exhaustive analysis of the arena comes to a close, let the complex web of archetypes, card interactions, and strategic matchups settle gently into your mind. Picture the arena grid in your mind's eye, no longer a chaotic battlefield of noise and frustration, but an orderly, beautiful, mathematical tapestry of tiles, ranges, vectors, and elixir costs. Understand that every match is a conversation, every card placement a question, and every well-timed Mega Knight drop a definitive, elegant answer. Breathe deeply, feel the quiet, reassuring weight of the dark iron armor guarding the lanes, and let the rhythmic, steady pulse of the arena guide you smoothly into a deep, restful, and undisturbed sleep. Chapter 9. To transcend standard tactical knowledge and reach the absolute zenith of Clash Royale mastery, one must abandon viewing the arena as a mere battleground and begin perceiving it as a rigid, tile-based coordinate plane. Every square on the grid possesses exact coordinates, and every unit operates under strict, unyielding algorithmic parameters. Within this spatial calculus, the Mega Knight is not merely a heavy unit. He is a complex state machine, governed by precise distance thresholds, wind-up frame counts, and targeting vectors. Master readers of the grid do not simply react to his presence. They manipulate his internal logic, turning his own physics into a weapon against him, or leveraging his evolved form to rewrite the spatial rules of the game entirely. The foundational mechanical pillar of the Mega Knight's toolkit is his leap mechanic, an ability governed by a strict spatial boundary, a minimum distance of 3.5 tiles, and a maximum range of 5.0 tiles. When a target enters this precise 1.5 tile window, the Mega Knight pauses his walking animation and enters his jump wind-up state, which lasts for exactly 1.1 seconds. During this crucial 1.1 second load time, he crouches, coils his massive leg springs, and prepares to launch his multi-ton iron frame through the air. This 1.1 second animation window is a critical vulnerability for high-level technical play. If a player inflicts a hard knockback or a stun effect, During this exact frame sequence, the Mega Knight's jump state machine is completely interrupted and reset to 0. A perfectly timed zap, Electro Spirit, or Bowler Boulder striking him mid-crouch, forces him to cancel his leap entirely, resetting his internal attack clock and forcing him to re-evaluate his targeting logic. If the target has moved within his 3.5 tile inner perimeter during that interruption, he is forced to abandon the leap and perform a slow, standard melee swing instead, stripping him of his devastating 2x jump impact damage. Conversely, an attacker who understands spatial spacing can engineer the terrifying phenomenon known as jump chaining. If a defending player deploys troops in a staggered, diagonal line across their side of the arena, each separated by roughly 4 tiles, advancing Mega Knight can leap from one unit to the next in rapid succession. He becomes a guided missile, bouncing across the board in a continuous series of high-impact concussive landings, clearing entire defenses while traversing huge swaths of territory in seconds. Preventing jump chains requires hyper-rigidity in placement, ensuring support troops are either clustered tightly inside his 3.5 tile dead zone or spaced far beyond his 5.0 tile maximum reach. While neutralizing a Mega Knight defensively is essential, the absolute pinnacle of defensive efficiency is converting the opponent's 7 Elixir Titan into an early King Tower activation. Activating the King Tower permanently adds a third cannon to your defensive network, boosting your total defensive firepower by over 33% for the remainder of the match. Because the Mega Knight possesses high health, predictable targeting, and a willingness to leap toward isolated ground targets, he is one of the single easiest cards in the game to pull directly into the central King's tile. The most famous and reliable method of King activation against the Mega Knight is the central tornado pull. As the Mega Knight approaches the river bridge, the defending player waits for him to cross onto their side of the grid. The instant he enters the outer lane, a 3 Elixir tornado spell is deployed directly over the King Tower, with the outer edge of the vortex touching the Mega Knight's outer hitbox. The swirling winds drag the 7 Elixir behemoth forcefully into the central tile space. When he lands, his area of effect splash damage strikes the King Tower directly, waking the king from his slumber and causing him to raise his heavy cannon. The defender trades 3 Elixir and a fraction of King Tower health to permanently alter the defensive geometry of the board. For masters of non-spell micro-positioning, an even more elegant technique exists: the naked 2-card King pull, using low-cost cycle cards like 1 Elixir Skeletons and an Ice Spirit. As the Mega Knight crosses the bridge in the right lane, the player places a squad of skeletons in the exact center of the map, 2 tiles into the opposite left lane. The Mega Knight detects the skeletons within his 3.5 to 5.0 tile vision cone, turns 90 degrees away from the Princess Tower, and leaps into the central river channel. Just as he crushes the first skeleton, an Ice Spirit is placed directly in front of the King Tower. The Mega Knight, having cleared his original target, acquires the Ice Spirit, leaps a second time directly onto the King's steps, and activates the main cannon. Through 2 single Elixir investments, a 7 Elixir monster is defanged, your King Tower is permanently activated, and you emerge with a massive +5 Elixir advantage. As if his base mechanics were not complex enough, the modern era of Clash Royale introduced a seismic structural shift in the card's identity: the Evolution Mega Knight. The Evolution system grants specific cards enhanced, godlike capabilities after completing a predetermined number of card cycles. For the Mega Knight, completing his activation cycle unlocks a visually stunning mechanical transformation, donning golden-trimmed iron armor, glowing runic gauntlets, and an entirely new physics-defying mechanic known as the uppercut. The evolved Mega Knight discards the traditional rules of close-quarters combat. When he engages an enemy unit in melee range, he does not simply swing his wrecking balls downward to deal splash damage. He winds up his massive iron fists and delivers a shattering, upward-striking uppercut. This blow inflicts massive localized damage and triggers an extreme physical knockback vector, physically launching enemy units backward across the arena tiles like ragdolls. This knockback mechanic completely revolutionizes his role on the board and shatters traditional counter strategies. Standard single-target heavy counters, such as a mini P.E.K.K.A., a Knight, or a Valkyrie, rely on remaining in constant physical contact with their target to deal high single-target DPS. When deployed against an evolved Mega Knight, the moment these units make contact, the Titan delivers his uppercut, hurling them 4 to 6 tiles backward toward their own crown tower. The counter units are forced to slowly walk all the way back to him, taking continuous arrow fire from the Princess Tower and secondary strikes from the Mega Knight's supporting troops the entire time. By the time they reach him for a second swing, their health bars are depleted, rendering traditional defensive responses completely obsolete. Furthermore, the evolved Mega Knight transforms the enemy's own troops into dynamic, kinetic projectiles. When he uppercuts a medium health unit like a wizard or an executioner, the airborne unit is launched directly into any troops standing behind them, dealing collision damage and knocking back entire secondary lines. The defender's own push is turned against itself, colliding in a chaotic, pinball-like cascade of physical displacement. An evolved Mega Knight, marching down the lane, creates an inescapable spatial compression, forcing the opponent to rethink their entire defensive deck geometry, or face complete tactical annihilation. Navigating this intense level of spatial complexity demands an incredible level of psychological composure, a mental state known among elite players as managing the mental stack. In high-level play, a player cannot afford to experience panic, anger, or frustration when an evolved Mega Knight drops onto the grid. The human mind can only process a finite amount of information per second. Allowing emotion to enter your thoughts consumes vital mental bandwidth that should be dedicated to calculating elixir counts, tracking cycle positions, and measuring tile distances. When the thudding deployment sound echoes through your headphones and the shadow of the blimp covers the river, the enlightened player enters a state of hyper-focused flow. They do not see a terrifying dark titan. They see a sequence of numbers, a 3.5 tile radius circle, and a 1.1 second wind-up clock. They calmly count the opponent's remaining elixir, track the position of their own cycle cards, and execute their micro-placements with surgical, mechanical perfection. They place their ice golem on the exact center left tile, initiate the kite, pull the titan into the crossfire of both towers, and calmly transition into their own counter-offensive, without missing a single beat of the game's rhythmic pulse. Through precise mechanical understanding, mastery of King Tower activations, and adaptation to his evolved state, the Mega Knight ceases to be an overwhelming wall of force and becomes the ultimate test of a player's spatial intelligence. Respect the geometry, master the timing, and control the mental stack, and you will find that even the heaviest titan in the arena moves entirely according to your design. Chapter 10. To complete the journey through the life, mechanics, and strategic evolution of the Mega Knight, one must ascend from the local ladder arenas to the absolute apex of competitive human play, the global esports stage. In the hyper-polished, high-stakes ecosystem of the Clash Royale League, CRL, World Finals, and international monthly qualifiers, every single tile placement is calculated down to the millimeter. Every elixir unit is tracked with Rain Man precision, and a single misplaced frame can cost a competitor tens of thousands of dollars. In this pristine environment, where casual habits do not exist and mid-ladder panics are entirely absent, the Mega Knight undergoes his final, most fascinating transformation. He ceases to be a blunt mid-ladder instrument, or a terrifying casual boogeyman, evolving instead into a high-volatility, specialized pocket pick, a tactical wildcard capable of completely dismantling an opponent's game plan on the global stage. In professional best-of-3 and best-of-5 tournament series, mental warfare and deck scouting play as significant a role as mechanical execution. When elite players prepare for a match, they meticulously analyze their opponent's historical deck preferences, cycle speeds, and defensive tendencies. This creates an environment dominated by hyper-optimized meta decks, 2.6 Hog Cycle, Minor Control, P.E.K.K.A. Bridges Spam, and Lava Loon. Because high-level competitors construct their decks to counter predictable meta trends, introducing an unexpected Mega Knight into a crucial Game 3 or Game 5 operates as a masterclass in psychological disruption. The sudden appearance of the 7 Elixir Titan forces the opposing pro to instantly abandon their muscle memory defensive sequences, recalculate their elixir trade formulas under intense timer pressure, and adapt to a massive physical force they did not prepare to face. This competitive volatility is most pronounced in modern tournament drafting formats, specifically Mega Draft, Triple Draft, and the multi-deck duel format. In standard ladder play, a player can build a perfectly customized deck designed to hard counter heavy tanks. In Mega Draft, however, players take turns selecting cards from a shared pool, systematically banning key counters and building synergies on the fly. Within this limited resource environment, the Mega Knight becomes an absolute Tier 0 draft priority. Without guaranteed access to hard single-target counters like the P.E.K.K.A., Inferno Tower, or Mini P.E.K.K.A., An uncoordinated draft deck simply lacks the raw structural damage required to stop a full-health Mega Knight march. A master drafter who secures the Mega Knight, while selectively drafting away the opponent's resetting spells or tank killers, effectively secures a mechanical checkmate before the first card is even played on the arena floor. The modern competitive landscape has further complicated this strategic equation through the introduction of specialized tower troops. The shift away from the traditional Princess Tower to alternative defense engines, such as the Heavy Cannon Cannoneer or the High-Burst Dagger Duchess, has radically altered the thermodynamic physics of the Mega Knight's approach vectors. Against a Cannoneer tower, which fires slow, devastating, high-damage cannonballs, the Mega Knight encounters a formidable structural barrier. The Cannoneer's high single-target DPS melts the Mega Knight's health pool far faster than the standard Princess Tower, severely punishing raw, unsupported pushes. However, the expert player turns this exact interaction on its head, because the Cannoneer attacks at a slow, rigid cadence. Deploying cheap swarm units directly alongside the Mega Knight completely overwhelms the tower's targeting logic. The Cannoneer wastes its massive, heavy cannonballs overkill, striking a single one-elixir skeleton, allowing the Mega Knight to close the distance unmolested and land a game-ending jump onto the masonry. Conversely, the interaction with the Dagger Duchess introduces a high-intensity study in temporal timing and burst economics. The Dagger Duchess possesses a fully loaded quiver of fast-throwing daggers that unleash catastrophic initial burst damage before entering a slow, vulnerable reload state. Dropping a lone Mega Knight into a fully loaded Dagger Duchess is tactical suicide. Her rapid-fire daggers strip over half his massive health pool in a matter of seconds. The master player instead plays a game of attrition. They use cheap cycle cards to force the Duchess to empty her quiver defending minor threats, depleting her dagger reserves down to zero. The very instant her ammunition is exhausted, and she enters her slow, single dagger reload loop, the Mega Knight drops from the sky. Deprived of her burst capability, the Duchess watches helplessly as the heavy Iron Titan absorbs her weak, reloaded strikes and pulverizes her tower stone by stone. This intricate dance between card mechanics, tower troops, and balance shifts highlights the infinite fluidity of the Clash Royale metagame. Decks rise and fall, balance updates tweak damage percentages, and new card mechanics emerge to disrupt established norms. Yet, through years of meta shifts, balance overhauls, and mechanical evolutions, the Mega Knight has remained one of the most resilient, iconic, and culturally significant fixtures in digital gaming history. He is the ultimate litmus test of a player's skill, a card that ruthlessly filters out chaotic, emotionally driven play, while granting infinite strategic depth to those who master the subtle laws of spatial geometry, elixir management, and psychological control. When you look back across the entire spectrum of the arena, from the panicked, chaotic bridges spam of the lower arenas to the cold, mathematical perfection of the World Finals, the true beauty of the Mega Knight is finally revealed. He is not a balance mistake, nor is he an unbeatable monster. He is a work of strategic art, a physical embodiment of risk versus reward, and the ultimate gateway to competitive enlightenment. To hate the Mega Knight is to remain a novice, bound by emotional frustration and spatial ignorance. To understand the Mega Knight is to see the arena clearly, recognizing every tile as a coordinate, every second as an economic resource, and every interaction as a predictable, solvable equation. Now, as the long journey through the mechanics, economics, deck building, and microgeometry comes to its final, peaceful resolution, you possess the complete, absolute truth of the arena. You know when to drop him, how to kite him, where to pull him, and how to harness his kinetic power to achieve ultimate victory. The noise of the mid-ladder crowd fades into quiet silence. The flickering lights of the arena turn down, casting long, peaceful shadows across the pristine sand of the battlefield. The heavy dark armor rests quietly in the Hall of Legends, its iron springs coiling gently in the dark, ready for the next battle. Breathe slowly, close your eyes, and rest peacefully in the quiet, absolute confidence of a true master of the game. Chapter 11. Beyond tile placements, precise frame counts, and mechanical interactions lies the ultimate level of competitive play, the quiet mastery of internal psychology and macro awareness. When two top-tier players face each other with identical decks and flawless technical execution, the match is no longer decided by who knows the mechanics better. It is decided by who maintains complete clarity of mind under extreme atmospheric pressure. In these rarefied heights of play, every second of unspent elixir becomes a silent dialogue between two competitors, a game of high-stakes chess where patience is the deadliest weapon in the arena. To reach this state of supreme composure, a player must master the art of implicit card tracking and elixir counting, without diverting mental resources from active micro-interactions. You do not manually count to 10 in your head as elixir regenerates. Instead, you develop an internal metronome, feeling the steady 4-second pulse of single elixir and the rapid 2-second heartbeat of double elixir in your chest. You instinctively know, without looking at an external counter, that when your opponent drops an offensive troop at the river, their remaining elixir pool is sitting at a precise, vulnerable number, leaving them exposed to a swift counter-assault in the opposite lane. This deep internal rhythm allows you to manipulate your opponent's emotions by deliberately delaying a defensive deployment until the very last possible frame, allowing an enemy unit to travel 3 tiles deeper into your territory than usual. You create a false sense of security. The opponent misinterprets your patient calculation as hesitation or panic, overcommitting additional elixir into a push that you then instantly vaporize with a single, perfectly placed defensive unit. You turn their own impatience into their undoing, absorbing their aggressive energy and converting it into your own unstoppable momentum. As you step away from the digital grid, realize that the discipline cultivated on these virtual tiles extends far beyond the boundaries of a 4-minute match. The ability to remain calm amidst chaos, to calculate risk without emotional distortion, and to respect the subtle power of patience is the mark of a true master. The arena lights dim completely now, casting soft, ambient light over the empty stone lanes. The cards lie neatly stacked, the heavy iron armor is set safely aside, and the quiet stillness of night settles over the royal arena. Let your mind release every remaining calculation. Let your breath slow to a steady, easy cadence, and sink deeply into a quiet, effortless, and restorative sleep. Chapter 12. To step onto the competitive stage, not merely as an adept tactician, but as an absolute grand master of the digital arena, one must extend their understanding into the theoretical foundations of competitive game theory, mathematical probability, cognitive physiology, and subframe execution mechanics. At this terminal level of play, the boundary between player and game engine dissolves entirely. The grid is no longer a visual surface rendered on a glass screen. It becomes an abstract vector space, where thousands of calculations converge in real time. To achieve total mastery over this space, a player must systematically examine the deepest dimensions of competitive execution: mathematical risk assessment, server tick physics, phase shift macroeconomics, archetypal matchup matrices, psychological neuromodulation, and ultimate strategic synthesis. At any given millisecond during a match, the current game state can be represented as a complex decision tree. Every card choice, placement coordinate, and timing delay yields a calculated expected value, measuring the net return in elixir efficiency, tower damage inflicted, or structural positioning gained against the risk incurred. In classical game theory, a player seeking optimal performance strives to reach a strategic equilibrium where neither competitor can improve their position by unilaterally altering their strategy, provided the opponent's strategy remains constant. However, during the opening sequence of a match, complete information is withheld. You do not know your opponent's 8 cards, nor do you know their immediate card rotation. Thus, the opening 60 seconds represent a game of incomplete information under stochastic conditions. The novice player makes uncalculated gambits during this window, dropping heavy investments at the bridge in hopes of catching the opponent unprepared. The grandmaster, conversely, operates under strict minimization of risk. They utilize lightweight, low-risk probing maneuvers, a single spirit deployed at the river, or a small squad of cycle troops split behind the king tower, to gather intelligence without committing critical resources. When calculating the value of an investment, a master weighs 3 distinct variables: the immediate elixir differential, the positional capital gained by surviving units, and the information asymmetry generated by uncovering the opponent's hidden deck options while keeping your own rotation concealed. A grandmaster never initiates an offensive push unless the calculated value yields a net positive return across these elements combined. If dropping a heavy splash tank creates an immediate elixir deficit on paper, but generates massive positional capital by invalidating an incoming high-cost enemy push, the overall strategic return remains overwhelmingly positive. Understanding this balance prevents premature emotional investments and guarantees that every single card placed onto the board serves a clear, quantitative purpose. While macro strategy dictates what cards to play, micromechanics dictate how those cards interact on a physical level. The game simulation engine runs on a fixed server-side tick rate, processing logic at precise intervals 20 times per second, or every 50 milliseconds. Furthermore, every card deployment incurs a standard 1-second deployment delay, supplemented by network latency between your mobile device and the central game server. To achieve frame-perfect placements, a competitor must account for 3 distinct physical phenomena embedded within the code: collision box radii, targeting acquisition frames, and server input synchronization. Every unit possesses a hard-coded 2-dimensional circular collision box centered on its feet, independent of its visual upper body rendering. Heavy units like the Mega Knight, P.E.K.K.A., and Golem possess massive collision radii, whereas medium units, like the Knight or Valkyrie, possess significantly smaller collision profiles. When 2 heavy units collide, their collision boxes cannot overlap. They exert physical mass against each other, creating displacement vectors that can push smaller units entirely out of their intended pathing corridors. Additionally, when a unit completes its movement or destroys its current target, it enters a targeting scan phase that updates every few server ticks. If a new enemy unit enters its vision radius during a tick update, the unit locks onto the target and initiates its attack wind-up animation. However, if a secondary target enters closer proximity during the exact tick window before the wind-up frame locks, the pathfinding algorithm recalculates, causing the unit to stutter or switch targets. Understanding this subframe logic allows a player to perform mid-animation retargeting tricks using micro-swarms placed at exact subtile intervals. To eliminate the impact of minor network jitter, high-level players utilize input buffering. By dragging a card to its destination tile and releasing it slightly before the required elixir threshold is visually displayed on screen, the client pre-sends the deployment packet to the server. The server executes the placement on the exact tick the required elixir becomes available, eliminating human reaction lag and guaranteeing a zero-latency response to fast-moving threats. By mastering subframe timing, a player can consistently execute high-difficulty mechanics, catching a sprinting prince charge on the exact tick before impact, blocking a subterranean threat from touching a crown tower by placing a unit on its exact underground shadow frame, or neutralizing an incoming barrel with a frame-perfect spell deployment that wipes out enemy troops the precise millisecond their feet touch the soil. A standard match is divided into distinct economic phases: single elixir time, double elixir time, triple elixir time, and sudden death tiebreaker. Each transition alters the fundamental laws of economic equilibrium across the board. In single elixir time, resource scarcity is absolute. A single misspent 4 elixir card represents a massive 11-second economic deficit, during which the opponent can easily punish an undefended lane. Consequently, single elixir time heavily favors low-cost control decks, fast cycle rotations, and reactive defensive postures. Heavy decks must focus entirely on damage mitigation, accepting minor tower chip damage in exchange for preserving elixir sanity. When double elixir time arrives, the regeneration rate doubles dramatically. The economic landscape undergoes a radical phase shift. The penalty for overcommitting is drastically reduced, as a major elixir deficit now recovers in a fraction of the time. Defensive cycle decks lose their structural advantage, as high-cost beatdown and heavy splash archetypes can now construct multi-card pushes with overlapping spell support that easily breach low-health cycle defenses. In triple elixir time, regeneration accelerates even further. Here, the game transitions from a strategic tactical simulation into a high-throughput bandwidth test. Cards enter the arena faster than the human visual system can process if unprompted. The optimal strategy transforms into relentless, continuous pressure, cycle-stacking heavy spells directly onto enemy crown towers, while maintaining an unbreakable wall of defensive mass across the river bridges. Every balanced deck constructed within the competitive meta aligns with fundamental strategic archetypes: control, beatdown, siege, bridges spam, spell bait, and split pressure. These archetypes exist in a dynamic, continuous relationship of counterplay. Control decks rely on low average elixir costs, high defensive efficiency, and consistent unstoppable chip damage. Beatdown decks sacrifice early tower health to construct massive, multi-unit pushes during double elixir. Siege decks utilize long-range win conditions placed on the defensive side of the river, forcing the opponent to approach them. Bridges spam decks punish instant investments with high-speed, high-threat units deployed directly at the river bridge. Spellbait decks overwhelm the opponent's limited spell selection by presenting a continuous stream of targets that demand immediate responses. Split-pressure decks force the opponent to defend both lanes simultaneously, rendering single-lane defensive setups useless. When a master enters a match, their primary objective during the opening phase is to identify the opponent's archetype alignment through card discovery. Once the opponent's alignment is confirmed, the master instantly transitions into the prescribed operational playbook for that specific matchup matrix, ignoring generic habits and adhering strictly to the theoretical counter-strategy required for victory. At the highest tiers of competitive esport play, mechanical skill and strategic knowledge are virtually identical among top competitors. The decisive factor that separates champions from runners-up is psychological resilience, the capacity to maintain physiological equilibrium and cognitive clarity under extreme stress. When a player experiences an unexpected loss, a bad matchup, or a devastating misplay, the human brain triggers a primal threat response, flooding the nervous system with stress hormones. This physiological reaction causes immediate cognitive impairments, attentional tunneling, motor control degradation, and emotional decision-making. Attentional tunneling causes the brain to hyper-focus on a single detail, such as a low-health enemy tower, while completely ignoring macro-level information, like an incoming opposite lane push or an empty elixir bar. Motor control degradation causes fine motor skills to regress under muscle tension, leading to slipped drag-and-drop inputs, misplaced tile coordinates, and delayed deployment timing. Emotional decision-making forces the player to abandon their calculated game plan, engaging in irrational, high-risk gambits driven by an urgent desire to regain lost tower health instantly. To counteract these physiological traps, elite competitors utilize targeted neuromodulation techniques designed to maintain a state of flow, a state of effortless, hyper-focused immersion, where decision-making occurs without friction or hesitation. To maintain this state, implement a structured mental reset immediately following any significant in-game error or match loss. First, perform somatic downregulation through slow, controlled breathing. Deep nasal inhalations, followed by long, slow exhalations, immediately stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering heart rate and restoring physiological control within seconds. Second, execute cognitive reframing. Instantly reframe the error, not as an emotional failure, but as a neutral data point. Ask yourself what exact variable was calculated incorrectly: tile distance, elixir count, or rotation tracking. Identifying the variable converts emotional frustration into analytical processing. Third, initiate a tactical reset. Picture the arena grid completely clear of all units, returning your internal state to minute zero of a fresh match. The past play no longer exists. Only the current coordinate grid and the next optimal input matter. Furthermore, long-term competitive excellence requires structured post-match auditing. Never close the application after a loss in anger. Review the engagement calmly, tracking your elixir bar against your opponents. Identify the exact moment where the economic or spatial equilibrium shifted away from you. By transforming every defeat into a rigorous scientific audit, you eliminate the emotional sting of losing and turn every match into a stepping stone toward absolute mastery. We arrive, at last, at the ultimate destination of our grand journey through the arena. We have traversed the foundational mechanics of splash damage, analyzed the intricate macroeconomics of elixir management, dissected the subtle arts of dual-lane split pressure and microgeometry, mastered the advanced mechanics of the evolved heavy titan, navigated the high-stakes world of international esports, and mastered the internal psychology of the competitive mind. Standing at this absolute summit, take a moment to look down upon the vast, beautiful landscape of the game. You no longer see a mere casual entertainment app on a screen. You see a timeless, elegant theater of human intellect, a digital chessboard where strategy, timing, spatial geometry, and psychological composure combine to create moments of pure, breathtaking artistry. You realize now that the heavy dark titan, with his iron armor, his coiling leg springs, and his devastating concussive landings, was never just a digital card in a deck. He was your teacher. He taught you the value of patience, showing you how to absorb pressure calmly, without breaking. He taught you the power of spatial awareness, demonstrating how a single well-timed landing can alter the flow of an entire battle. He taught you the beauty of balance, proving that even the heaviest force can be neutralized by simple, elegant intelligence, and that true power lies not in mindless destruction, but in precise, disciplined application. When you step into the arena now, you do so with the quiet, unshakable confidence of a true master. You do not rush your placements. You do not panic under pressure. You do not react with anger to hard counters or unexpected plays. You simply watch the grid, feel the steady, rhythmic pulse of the elixir clock in your chest, and execute your strategy with effortless, mathematical perfection. The arena is quiet now. The crowds in the grandstands have gone home, leaving behind pristine stone lanes, glowing softly under the starry night sky. The river flows gently beneath the wooden bridges, carrying the calm, peaceful quiet of absolute understanding across the empty battlefield. The dark iron armor rests safely in its place, its heavy work finished, its legacy secure. You have mastered the grid, you have mastered the game, and above all, you have mastered yourself. Breathe deeply. Feel the cool, peaceful stillness of complete achievement wash over you. Let go of every remaining thought and drift gracefully into a deep, unbroken, and serene sleep. Chapter 13. To truly appreciate the grand tapestry of the arena, one must look beyond the immediate tactical grid and subframe execution physics to examine the rich narrative lore and world building that gives life to every unit on the battlefield. Beneath the manicured green grass and stone bridges lies an ancient, pulsing ecosystem powered by raw, subterranean elixir. In the deeper lore of the Clash universe, pink elixir is not merely a digital resource spent during a 4-minute match. It is the lifeblood of the world, a magical fluid surging through subterranean ley lines beneath legendary arena, Spell Valley, and Electro Valley. This liquid essence carries immense kinetic and magical potential, capable of animating wooden constructs, empowering living warriors, and forging unbreakable bonds between commanders and their armies. When a card is played onto the grid, the king from his royal throne draws directly from this subterranean reservoir, channeling pure elixir through the castle floor to materialize troops out of thin air. Within this world of magic and machinery stands the legend of the Mega Knight's creation. Unlike magical entities born directly from elixir rituals, the Mega Knight represents the absolute pinnacle of mechanical engineering and physical armor design within the Clash realm. Lore tells of a humble knight who, after countless battles of standing on the front line with a simple iron sword and wooden shield, sought to create a suit of armor that could withstand the overwhelming tide of enemy swarms. Taking his quest to the master builder in the gear-driven workshops of Electro Valley, the knight spent months forging a heavy suit of dark iron plating, reinforced pauldrons, and massive iron wrecking balls attached to his gauntlets. To solve the problem of mobility within such massive weight, the master builder engineered high-tension industrial springs beneath the boots, allowing the wearer to harness gravitational energy and launch his multi-ton frame through the air, turning raw falling mass into a devastating concussive shockwave upon impact. This mechanical origin creates a fascinating philosophical contrast with the other heavy titan of the arena, the P.E.K.K.A., where the P.E.K.K.A. remains shrouded in dark magical mystery, an armored samurai whose true identity beneath the purple steel remains unknown, driven by dark elixir power and an enigmatic obsession with butterflies. The Mega Knight is an undeniable triumph of human ingenuity, leverage, and kinetic mechanics. The P.E.K.K.A. strikes with singular, soul-cutting precision, using enchanted rune swords to slice through single targets. The Mega Knight, conversely, utilizes pure physical momentum, sweeping his heavy iron maces through the air to scatter entire armies across the arena tiles. One is a mysterious dark magic construct. The other is a walking industrial fortress, built to protect the realm through raw physical presence. Understanding this deep lore enriches every step of a player's journey through the competitive ladder, particularly within the modern structure of the Path of Legends. The Path of Legends represents the ultimate competitive proving ground in Clash Royale, replacing the traditional linear trophy road with a structured, league-based ascension system. The path consists of 10 distinct leagues, stretching from the entry-level Bronze League all the way through Master, Grandmaster, Champion, Royal Champion, and finally into the elite realm of Ultimate Champion. Each league on the path is visualized as a vertical stairway of stone and gold steps, requiring players to secure consecutive victories to climb from one platform to the next. The mechanics of the Path of Legends are governed by a delicate balance of risk mitigation and skill validation. As players climb through the lower and middle leagues, the path is peppered with golden steps. A golden step acts as an unbreakable safety threshold. Once a player reaches a golden step through a victory, losing a subsequent match cannot cause them to drop below that platform. This design eliminates the anxiety of catastrophic losing streaks in the early stages of the climb, allowing competitors to experiment with deck variations and hone their technical execution without risking weeks of progress. Furthermore, early season performance is rewarded through win streak multipliers, which allow high-skilled players to leap up 2 or 3 steps per victory, rapidly accelerating their return to high-level competition. However, as a competitor ascends into the higher tiers of the Path of Legends, specifically through Royal Champion and into Ultimate Champion, the golden steps disappear completely, leaving only fragile stone steps beneath your feet. In these upper reaches, every defeat cracks the stone, dropping you back down the stairway and testing your true consistency under pressure. Reaching Ultimate Champion converts your progress from a simple step counting system into a dynamic global rating system known as the Hall of Fame. Here, your performance is measured by a precise numerical rating calculated from your overall season win rate, match efficiency, and the strength of opponents faced. Reaching the Hall of Fame is the ultimate validation of a Clash Royale player, placing your name alongside the elite grandmasters of the global community. Navigating the Path of Legends requires a sophisticated understanding of how meta decks evolve across different league tiers. In the lower leagues, from bronze to gold, the player pool is saturated with unrefined, highly chaotic decks, featuring multiple heavy tanks, unpredictable card combinations, and reckless bridge play. Success in these early leagues demands disciplined defense and patient counterpushing, allowing aggressive opponents to exhaust their elixir before punishing them with a single coordinated push. In the middle leagues, such as Master and Grandmaster, the competition shifts toward established meta decks, played with moderate technical skill. Here, success requires strict cycle tracking and archetype matchup knowledge. In the highest leagues of Royal Champion and Ultimate Champion, the game transforms into a battle of micro-adjustments and psychological endurance. At this level, every player possesses flawless archetype knowledge and frame-perfect placement skills. Matches are frequently decided by fractions of an elixir unit, subtle bait plays, or single-tile misdirections. To maintain a steady climb through these elite ranks, a competitor must structure their play into focused, disciplined sessions. Playing dozens of ladder matches continuously leads to cognitive fatigue, degrading visual processing speed, and leading to delayed reaction times. The Grandmaster operates under the rule of 3, playing in focused blocks of 3 matches, followed by a mandatory rest interval to analyze replays, regulate breathing, and refresh mental clarity before stepping back onto the stone steps. Deeply woven into this competitive journey is the lore of the royal towers themselves. The king sitting atop his royal fortress and the 2 princesses guarding the flanking lanes are not mere passive targets. They are the ancient guardians of the kingdom's honor. The crowns earned in battle represent royal authority, recognized throughout the Clash realm as symbols of absolute mastery. The king's cannon, sleeping peacefully until awakened by damage or royal distress, represents the realm's last line of defense, a heavy artillery piece capable of turning the tide of an entire siege when properly activated through tactical pulling maneuvers. Every match played on the Path of Legends is a continuation of this royal tournament, a celebration of skill, lore, and strategic mastery passed down through generations of warriors. When you combine the deep lore of the Clash world with the mathematical precision of high-level ladder play, you gain a profound perspective on your journey as a player. You realize that every card in your deck has a story, every tile on the grid has a purpose, and every step on the Path of Legends is a testament to your dedication and growth. The dark iron armor of the Mega Knight, the mechanical springs of the Master Builder, the pink elixir surging beneath the stone bridges, and the golden crowns glowing atop the towers, all weave together into a single, majestic experience. The journey through this chapter is complete, and the lesson is fulfilled. The high-stakes intensity of the Path of Legends fades now into quiet, peaceful stillness. Picture the Master Builder's workshop in Electro Valley, where the gears slow their spinning and the bright electric coils dim to a soft, warm glow. Picture the vast stone stairways of the Path of Legends, resting quietly under the cool night sky, illuminated by the gentle moonlight. The Dark Titan sleeps peacefully in his heavy iron armor, his springs uncoiled and motionless. The royal arena is entirely quiet, the pink elixir resting calmly in its deep subterranean veins. Breathe slowly. Let every thought of strategy and competition melt away. Feel a deep sense of total accomplishment, and drift effortlessly into a peaceful, deep, and restful sleep. Chapter 14. To possess complete mastery over the arena is to understand that a card never exists in isolation. The Mega Knight, for all his physical mass and concussive landing power, is an engine that requires precise fuel, structural framework, and complementary tools to operate at maximum efficiency. Beyond individual troop interactions lies the realm of complete deck ecosystem design, spell threshold economics, multi-deck tournament formats like Clan Wars, off-meta homebrew engineering, and special arena challenge environments. By understanding how the Dark Titan interacts with the broader architecture of the entire card library, a competitor transitions from a single card specialist into a master architect of the game. The most vital starting point in holistic deck design is mastering spell synergy and damage threshold calculations. In high-level play, a spell is not merely a tool for damaging towers or clearing swarms. It is a mechanical modifier designed to alter the health thresholds of enemy units so that the Mega Knight can instantly eliminate them in a single strike. Every unit in the game possesses a precise health pool, and every level of the Mega Knight deals exact values of landing splash and standard melee damage. When a player pairs the Mega Knight with small, medium, or heavy spells, they are calculating how to reduce enemy troop health to 0 in the fewest possible server ticks. Consider the classic combination of the Mega Knight and the Zap spell. A standard landing impact from a Mega Knight leaves high-density swarms like minions, or a minion horde, at a sliver of remaining health, allowing them to continue firing aerial projectiles while hovering just outside his ground-based melee range. By casting a simultaneous Zap spell onto the drop zone, the instantaneous electrical shock deals just enough damage to instantly wipe out the aerial swarm, perfectly protecting the Mega Knight's entry frame and preserving his entire health pool for the upcoming push. Alternatively, pairing the Mega Knight with a poison spell creates an 8-second denial zone across the river bridge. When the Titan drops into the center of a poison field, any low-health swarm the opponent attempts to deploy to distract him is continuously melted by the environmental damage, ensuring that his pathing toward the Crown Tower remains completely unblocked. In recent balance eras, the introduction of specialized spells like the Void spell has introduced even deeper tactical nuance to these threshold calculations. The Void spell deals variable damage based on the number of targets inside its field, dealing massive single-target destruction when locking onto an isolated unit, but drastically reducing its damage output if multiple troops are grouped inside its area of effect. An expert player utilizes the Mega Knight's wide area of effect landing to instantly clear away surrounding low-health guards, skeletons, or goblins, leaving a heavy enemy tank or backline support unit completely isolated. The moment the surrounding swarm is vaporized by the Dark Titan's steel boots, the player drops a Void spell directly onto the remaining high-health target, triggering the spell's maximum single-target damage multiplier to erase the enemy tank from the battlefield in seconds. This deep understanding of card synergies becomes paramount when competing in multi-deck formats, most notably Clan Wars. Unlike standard ladder or tournament play, where a competitor relies on a single optimized 8-card deck, Clan Wars requires players to build and pilot 4 entirely distinct decks, utilizing 32 unique cards, with 0 overlap allowed across the sets. Building 4 independent, high-performing decks demands master-level resource allocation, ensuring that high-value support troops, win conditions, and spells are distributed efficiently, without starving any individual deck of its essential operational tools. Within a 4-deck Clan War setup, deciding where to assign the Mega Knight requires strategic foresight. Because the Mega Knight acts as both a heavy defensive splash tool and a high-priority distraction engine, placing him in a deck that demands heavy single-target support cards, like the P.E.K.K.A., Mini P.E.K.K.A., or Inferno Tower, can create severe resource conflicts across your remaining 3 decks. The optimal strategy is to build a self-contained, low-conflict archetype around the Mega Knight, pairing him with cards that are rarely required in traditional Golem, Logbait, or Hog Control decks. A Master Clan War deck builder frequently pairs the Mega Knight with high-velocity secondary threats like the Skeleton Barrel, Flying Machine, Electro Dragon, or Wall Breakers. The Skeleton Barrel is an exceptional partner in this isolated environment. As the Mega Knight marches across the bridge, absorbing Crown Tower target locks, the 2 Elixir Skeleton Barrel flies directly overhead. When the barrel pops over the tower, the drop skeletons rain down directly behind the target, dealing catastrophic damage, while the tower remains completely focused on the dark iron armor in front of it. By constructing a hyper-efficient, low-cost bait shell around the Mega Knight in your first deck, you preserve crucial cards like the Log, Tornado, Lightning, and classic cycle troops for your remaining 3 Clan War decks, ensuring high competitive win rates across all 4 daily battles. While following established meta archetypes provides a reliable foundation for success, true strategic innovation occurs in the realm of homebrew deck engineering. An off-meta homebrew deck is a custom-built card combination designed specifically to defy standard player expectations and exploit the predictable habits of ladder opponents. When an opponent encounters a standard meta deck like 2.6 Hog or P.E.K.K.A. Bridges Spam, their brain immediately accesses pre-memorized defensive scripts. However, when they encounter a carefully constructed homebrew deck, their mental scripts become useless, forcing them to improvise under intense timer pressure. Engineering a successful homebrew Mega Knight deck requires strict adherence to fundamental structural design principles without falling into the trap of rigid, uncoordinated deck building. To build a truly viable custom creation, your deck must integrate 5 essential operational pillars within its continuous card rotation. First, it requires a primary heavy anchor, represented by the 7 Elixir Titan, to serve as your unbreakable defensive wall and primary pressure generator across the bridge. Second, you must incorporate a dedicated fast win condition, utilizing low to medium cost pressure cards like Wall Breakers, the Miner, the Goblin Barrel, or Royal Hogs that can bypass defensive roadblocks and inflict direct, reliable crown tower damage. Third, the deck demands dedicated anti-air DPS options, selecting at least 2 reliable air targeting units, such as the Musketeer, Mega Minion, Phoenix, or Electro Dragon, to dismantle aerial beatdown setups before they reach your towers. Fourth, you must include a lightweight ground distraction, utilizing low-cost cycle troops like skeletons, goblins, or an ice golem to manipulate enemy pathing vectors and pull heavy single-target threats away from your main lines. Finally, the rotation relies on a balanced 2-spell suite, pairing a lightweight reset or clear spell like Zap, Log, or Giant Snowball with a medium or heavy damage spell like Fireball, Poison, or Void. By adhering to this continuous structural formula, you can experiment with surprising off-meta card combinations, such as Mega Knight Freeze or Mega Knight Graveyard, while ensuring that your deck retains the structural integrity, elixir fluidity, and defensive coverage needed to defeat top-tier meta opponents. Beyond standard ladder matches, a true Grandmaster must adapt their strategic execution to special game modes and alternate arena rule sets, such as Ramp Up, Sudden Death, Draft, and Mirror challenges. Each of these unique game modes alters the fundamental pace and economic constraints of the match, requiring immediate shifts in how the Mega Knight is deployed onto the grid. In Ramp Up mode, the match begins in single elixir time, transitions into double elixir after 1 minute, and finally reaches triple elixir for the remaining duration of the game. In this format, patience is everything. During the single elixir opening, deploying a 7 elixir Mega Knight is exceptionally risky, as the slow regeneration rate leaves you completely vulnerable to fast opposite lane punishment. The correct approach is to play pure defense using your low-cost cycle cards, preserving tower health until double and triple elixir arrive. Once the match accelerates into triple elixir, the economic dynamic completely reverses. You can continuously cycle Mega Knights back to back, establishing an overwhelming, continuous wall of dark iron armor that smothers the opponent's arena side under relentless physical weight. In sudden death mode, the match ends the exact second a single crown tower is destroyed by either player, with double elixir active from the very first frame. Because a single mistake results in an immediate defeat, the psychological pressure in sudden death is immense. Here, the Mega Knight serves as the ultimate counterstrike shield. Because double elixir is active immediately, you can comfortably drop the Mega Knight on defense to crush incoming pushes, then instantly back him up with fast win conditions to mount a lethal single-lane assault before the opponent can recover their defensive footing. In draft and mirror challenges, players do not bring pre-built decks into the arena. In draft mode, you are presented with 4 choices between 2 cards, choosing one for yourself and passing the other to your opponent. In a draft environment, picking the Mega Knight is almost always a winning strategy, provided you also draft small spells to clear swarms or select cards that counter his primary hard counters. When playing a mirror match, where both players possess the exact same 8-card deck hand, the game becomes a masterclass in patience and timing. The player who drops their Mega Knight first often loses the engagement, as the second player can drop their own Mega Knight directly on top of the first one, utilizing their side's Princess Tower Fire to completely destroy the attacking Titan and emerge with a massive counter-pushing advantage. To continuously refine these skills across all game modes, the game provides the Card Mastery progression system. Card Masteries offer structured, in-game goals that reward players for repeatedly executing specific mechanical actions with a given card. For the Mega Knight, mastery tasks focus on measuring total damage dealt, counting successful jump landings, and tracking the number of enemy troops destroyed by his concussive entry impact. Treating card masteries as more than simple resource rewards allows you to turn them into a scientific feedback loop for your personal mechanics. By actively monitoring your mastery progress, you can track how efficiently you are utilizing the Mega Knight's jump mechanics in real matches. If your total landing counts are low relative to matches played, it indicates that you are dropping him too close to enemy troops, missing out on his crucial double damage jump landing. If your troop destruction numbers are high, it confirms that your spatial timing and drop coordinates are precise, consistently vaporizing enemy swarms upon entry. Grinding mastery tasks builds deep instinctual muscle memory, allowing you to estimate tile distances, jump ranges, and health thresholds instantly, without ever taking your eyes off the broader macro state of the arena. This seamless fusion of deep lore, holistic deck engineering, multi-deck versatility, and mechanical instinct completes the spiritual and tactical journey of the Clash Royale strategist. You no longer view the game as a series of isolated button taps or random outcomes. You see it as a grand, interconnected universe, where every card holds narrative lore, every spell modifies physical damage equations, every game mode tests a different dimension of your intellect, and every tile on the grid responds to your disciplined, conscious command. As our long, detailed exploration of the Dark Titan and the strategic grid reaches its quiet, final resolution, let the vast tapestry of knowledge settle gently into your mind. Picture the grand workshops of Electro Valley coming to a quiet rest, the bright elixir rivers flowing peacefully through their subterranean channels, and the stone stairways of the Royal Leagues standing quiet and serene under the moonlight. The heavy dark armor rests safely in the Hall of Champions, its heavy steel plates cool to the touch, its iron springs completely still. The battle is won, the strategy is complete, and the arena is at total peace. Close your eyes, breathe slowly and deeply, feel a quiet wave of complete calm wash over your mind, and sink effortlessly into a deep, uninterrupted, and restorative sleep.